460 horsepower and a sexy 3,400-pound two-seat body? Does this sound like a muscle car? You bet it does. Not many cars could safely be called America's sports car, and for good reason. The cars that could live up to that name are some pretty great automobiles. There's the Chevrolet Corvette, of course. This car's 50-year journey from its birth as a six-cylinder novelty car to the all-world high-performance vehicle it is today is one of the auto industry's great success stories. There's also the Shelby Cobra. For 6 years, this incredible machine raced heads up against the world's greatest racing cars and beat the pants off them on every race course from Riverside to Le Mans. Through the years, there have been a few others, from designers like Sidney Allard and Frank Curtis, who in the 50s managed to produce a few hand-built road racers, to Briggs Cunningham, whose Chrysler Hemi-powered sports cars were an awesome blend of good looks, ingenuity, and brute American horsepower. But today, one car is a serious challenger for the right to claim the title of America's sports car. Its name is Viper. And just like another famous snake of a few years earlier, the Viper's bite is deadly. The Dodge Viper was created for the sheer pleasure of fast driving. Its design omits a lot of things people have come to expect from Chrysler Corporation, like luxury accessories and lots of cargo space. This little car isn't going to appeal to a lot of people, but Chrysler doesn't see the Viper as a mainstream automobile. This car was built for taking it to the limit.
The Viper is an in-your-face, you-wish-you-could-be-like-me type car. I think there's no car in the world, not a Ferrari, not a Porsche, not a Corvette, no exotic that says it more like Viper. It is a true exotic, but it really is a true American muscle car.
With a curb weight of just 3,400 pounds, a wheelbase of 96 inches, and a 488 cubic inch V10 engine, the Viper can be just about anything it wants to be. It has the acceleration of a superstock dragster and the handling of a Le Mans sports car. In fact, the Viper is capable of more flat-out performance than most people will ever use. But the part of this car that everyone can appreciate is its sexy body. When it comes to styling, the Viper is a cut above anything else on the road.
You can't pull up to a light without somebody taking a picture or asking you questions, and if you pull into a gas station, you can plan on at least being there 10 minutes because you'll always have people come over asking you questions. It's a really exciting experience.
The Viper struck the automotive world when it was least expected, from a most unlikely source. In the 60s, Chrysler Corporation had all but owned the muscle car marketplace. But by the late 80s, Chrysler was known more for reinventing itself with the K car and the minivan. The Viper was a symbol of Chrysler's new image of excitement and high technology.
The Viper changed the whole face of Chrysler Corporation. It turned the whole program around and said, this is what we are, innovation, styling, we're ahead of everybody else, and that's what they have remained.
Building a car like the Viper was a bigger job than just tooling up a new family sedan. This car would have to be scratch-built. And to get the car they wanted, the Viper's designers would have to start at ground zero and invent everything they needed, including the manufacturing process. We'll show you how they got things rolling and who the players were when the American muscle car returns. To build a high-performance car in the 80s, you had to have some pretty strong backing from management. To build a car like the Viper, you had to go all the way to the top. Bob Lutz, Chrysler Corporation's president and chief operating officer, is the man most people credit with the vision to build this car. Lutz assembled his top people in engineering and design and outlined his vision for the Viper. Chrysler's chief designer, Tom Gale, was tapped to create the Viper's stop-traffic looks. From engineering, Lutz chose Francois Castaigne to be the man who would take the Viper from the drawing board to the road and to the racetrack. These three men, along with Carroll Shelby, the Viper's spiritual father, began to define this car. Their ground rules were simple. They wanted to build a two-seat roadster that offered the same gut-level performance as the Cobras of the 60s, but with every system updated with the best of today's technology. And if that wasn't a tall enough order, they intended to make a car they could sell for around $50,000. Clearly, the Viper was going to require some out-of-the-box thinking. This little latter-day Cobra would be laid out in a traditional front-engine, rear-wheel drive configuration. The Viper's body took on a low, mean shape, with a long hood and short rear deck, bulging fenders, 17-inch wheels, and huge tires. One of Tom Gale's most striking design elements was the large opening behind the front fenders, which vented hot under-hood air. The first prototype Viper was powered by a hybrid 10-cylinder engine, created by grafting 2 extra cylinders onto a production 360 cubic inch V8. When the Viper concept car was shown to the world in 1988, many people viewed it as the second coming of the Shelby Cobra. Within 3 months of its unveiling, Chrysler assembled a group of people to make the Viper a reality. Their timeline was short. They wanted to bring Viper into the marketplace by 1992. This group, headed by Chrysler engineer Roy Schoberg, became known as Team Viper.
Dodge got a lot of their craftspeople together and said, we're going to build this car. Who wants to come into the program and be part of Team Viper? And everybody wanted to be involved in it because it's such an exciting project. It was a lot different than building K cars and minivans.
Team Viper had a huge job. They had less than 3 years to create the production version of this car. And all they had to work with was a great design, one prototype car, and a mandate from Bob Lutz. The second Viper prototype was made of fiberglass, and its body began to take on more of the styling elements that would appear on the production car, like the sports bar and the side exit exhaust pipes. For the production Vipers, a new body material called RTM fiberglass was selected, which saved weight and speeded up the manufacturing process. Underneath the new skin, the engineers designed a tubular steel space frame chassis, which offered exceptional stiffness. The Viper would ride on coil-over shocks, with huge 13-inch disc brakes at each corner. 2 75/40 front tires on 17 by 10-inch alloy wheels and steamroller-sized 335/40 rear tires on 13-inch wide wheels on the rear meant this car was going to stick to the road. To keep costs down, the Viper would use some of Dodge's existing driveline components, including a new 8-liter 10-cylinder engine originally designed for pickup truck duty. In truck form, this cast-iron motor would be far too heavy for a car like the Viper, but they could save 100 pounds by casting the block and heads from aluminum alloy. Called the Copperhead engine, the Viper's V10 would measure an immense 488 cubic inches, with a 4-inch bore and a 3.88-inch stroke. Instead of overhead cams and other exotica, this engine was a conventional pushrod motor with a very streetable 9.1-to-1 compression ratio. Induction was handled by a ram-tuned multi-port fuel injection system. Lightweight, thin-wall exhaust manifolds fed into the Viper's specially designed side pipes, each containing their own low-restriction catalytic converter. This blend of off-the-shelf parts, leading-edge design, and new millennium technology produced 400 horsepower at 5,600 RPM and 450 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPM.
It's aluminum block, aluminum head. It's got the fuel injection, of course. It's just an absolutely fabulous car. It idles smooth, it runs hard, it develops a tremendous amount of horsepower, and with just a few modifications, you can take it over 500 horse with virtually zero modifications to it.
The engine and chassis were ready, and as the final touches were applied to the body and interior, Viper was ready for the road. But you had to figure a car like this would make a big entrance. Stay with us as the Viper hits the road on the American Muscle Car. When the Viper RT10 hit the showrooms in 1992, it had evolved into an amazing automobile. Even though the production model looked quite similar to the original prototype, not one single body panel was the same. More importantly, it was obvious to all who drove the RT10 that there wasn't another American car in its league. Despite its cafe racer good looks, the Viper was a single-purpose, no-compromise performance machine. And it said so everywhere you looked. No luxury items were found in the Viper's interior, except a set of comfortable leather-covered bucket seats. There were no side windows or even any outside door handles. There was a cloth top with zip-in side curtains. But if you were looking for an automatic transmission or air conditioning, this wasn't your ride. The Viper was a 100% manly man car.
Until you really get it on a racetrack, you really have no true clue of what this car is capable of. You can't, and I don't care what anybody says, you can't do it on the street. Not if you're sane.
Pulling through a Borg-Warner 6-speed gearbox and a 307 limited slip rear end, the Viper RT10 could run 0 to 60 in a shade over 4 seconds. Click off high 12-second quarter miles and top out at nearly 170 miles per hour. Not bad for a 50-state smog-legal car. But as awesome as its performance was, the most impressive thing about this little car was its quality. And like all of its other features, quality was a part of the car's design.
They build approximately 7 to 8 Vipers per day with a 5-day ship, so it's a low production number car. The car does not move from one space to another until it's totally inspected and everything is assembled correctly, and it is a really true hand-built car.
By the end of model year 1992, 251 Viper RT10s had been produced. And even at the car's fairly hefty $56,000 sticker price, the list of people waiting to put one in their driveway was starting to get lengthy. So staying with this good thing, Team Viper input just a few changes to the 93 cars, like embedding the radio antenna in the windshield. This year, Team Viper cranked out over 1,400 of the little jewels. And now, in addition to the original red Roadster, the RT10 was available in black. For the next couple years, Team Viper input several cosmetic changes to the RT10, like the addition of a traffic-stopping shade of yellow to their color palette. But in a gesture of goodwill to people who needed some extra ventilation, factory-installed air conditioning became available in 1994. For 1995, for the first time, Viper drivers could come in out of the rain. There was now a removable hardtop for the Roadster, which fit all previous models as well. Going into 1996, the Dodge Viper was the wind in Chrysler's sails, and Chrysler was extending the Viper look and its hot rod reputation to all of its other cars. But far from being done, Team Viper had a couple new mind-blowers waiting in the wings. Stay with us as the Viper takes another step closer to its Cobra roots on the American muscle car. Far from being old news, the Viper, now in its 5th year of the Roadster body style, was still selling every car Team Viper could make. But the people who built the Viper weren't content if there was one more thing they could do to improve this car. For 1996, the chassis was improved for more stiffness. The suspension was refined for even more driver control. And many of the car's steel suspension pieces were replaced with aluminum, saving nearly 60 pounds of unstrung weight. One of Viper's most noticeable changes since its birth was the rerouting of the car's exhaust from its ankle-toasting side pipes to a more traditional rear exit. This not only saved a lot of pant legs, many owners said it made a tougher-sounding exhaust note. As if the car didn't already get enough attention, this year Viper introduced 3 new color combinations. Black with silver stripes, a very Cunningham-looking white with blue stripes, and the wildest one yet, screaming red with yellow wheels. The 5-spoke racing wheels from the prototype car had been so popular that they now became the Viper's standard issue, with new Michelin Pilot Series tires. But the beloved RT10 Roadster was upstaged this year, and it took another Viper to do it. The car that would get all the ink in 1996 was the long-awaited GTS Coupe. This was the bombshell the Viper team had been hinting at for a couple years, and it looked an awful lot like one of America's favorite road racers. The GTS Coupe was as much a tribute to Carroll Shelby as it was America's newest supercar. The Coupe's body was much more than just an RT10 with a non-removable hardtop. The front end received an extensive redesign, with a wider grille opening, new driving lights, an NACA-style cold air duct, and louvers atop the front fenders. From the doors back, everything was completely new, with a hatchback opening rear glass and a rear deck spoiler. A racing gas cap now mounted to the passenger side sail panel. And as a further reminder that the GTS was a street-legal race car, the new roof had two bulges in just the right places to provide helmet clearance. Far from being just a cosmetic exercise, the GTS Coupe was radically different under its skin. The V10 was extensively redesigned for the Coupe, with lighter weight components, and now producing 450 horsepower and 488 foot-pounds of torque. Inside, the Coupe featured electric windows, airbags, and an upgraded sound system with a CD player. No doubt to counter the wail from the new exhaust system. With the introduction of the GTS Coupe, Viper was easily the most noticeable car on the street. Continuing their practice of bringing improvements online as soon as they were available, for the next 2 years, Team Viper did little things like upgrading the leather interior, and big things like replacing the cast exhaust manifolds with tubular headers for even more weight savings up front. By now, it was getting hard to find ways to make this little almost perfect car better. But Team Viper had a pretty good source of test data, feedback from Viper owners.
It's now at a level that it outdrives me. And I've been racing offshore powerboats and automobiles for the last 40 years of my life. And I have to admit that this car still has surprises for me.
Viper did have one other source of R&D information, the racetrack. We'll go racing with Team Viper when the American muscle car returns. There's only one real way to claim the title of America's sports car. You gotta go racing. After 4 years of making the most powerful production automobile in America, Viper was ready to bring all this power to the track. When they did, the results were predictably excellent. Viper won the 1997 FIA GT and Manufacturers' Championships, and it even won the world's most prestigious sports car race, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The car they took racing was a special GTS with a stiffer frame, a carbon fiber body, and an even more powerful V10, making upwards of 700 horsepower. Christened the GTS-R, only a handful of these racing-only Vipers were created and were only available to racing teams. But for everyone else, a special commemorative GTS-R was built in 1998. Done in the traditional American racing white with blue stripes, the GTS-R replica was outfitted with a carbon fiber rear wing and special BBS wheels. It was a classy way to celebrate the Viper's racing success. But regardless of Viper's road racing victories, there was no hiding the fact that this is a full-on muscle car, and muscle cars feel right at home on the drag strip. Doug Levin's Viper now sports his own custom-built nitrous oxide system and a belt-driven supercharger. But the most over-the-top Viper in captivity is Tony Darwin's street-legal 7-second Sir Hiss.
We had to put a parachute, wheelie bars, and an off-on safety switch back here, which is required by NHRA. We put a Mark Williams 9-inch base Ford rear end underneath it. We put way oversized tires, oversized rims, Side exhaust mainly because there just plain wasn't enough room underneath the car to put them in there. We then went to a Linko transmission. Of course, we got the full roll cage, all the complete instruments in it. We got the aluminum, all aluminum, Dodge-based prototype engine. It's got Dart heads, Dart intake. We've got the air conditioning, the power steering. We've got a Holley carb with a nitrous kit on it. It's adjustable from 250 to 650 horsepower. And of course, this being beautiful sunny Florida here, we have an aluminum Ron Davis racing radiator with dual fans and an oil core to keep things cool in the summer so we can cruise Clearwater Beach without overheating.
No doubt much of the Viper's success is due, of course, to its good looks and incredible performance. People buy Vipers for how it makes them feel.
Driving a Viper on the street really makes you feel young. It makes no difference how old you are. You feel like you're a teenager again with all that muscle.
In 2003, Dodge will roll out a new Viper, showing the first full-body styling change since the original RT10. But once again, the real story is under the skin. There seems to be no limit to how much horsepower they can find inside the V10. This year, the engine will measure 505 cubic inches and crank out 525 horses, making it even more appropriate to call the Viper America's true supercar. Since the very first prototype, Viper has been propelled by a single philosophy: no compromises. That philosophy didn't just build an awesome automobile. The Viper and its owners have a love affair going that no other car can claim.
When I had Corvettes, anything they did that improved that car, I immediately sold the old one and bought a new one. This car I don't feel that way about. From idle to screaming red headers, it's a really amazing car.
So while some people say the days of the American muscle car are over, Viper owners are out there on the streets and the racetracks letting everyone know that the muscle car is still around. It's just faster than it used to be. Nostalgia is nice, but for Viper drivers, these are the good old days. Thanks for watching, and remember, don't crush them, restore them. By the end of the muscle era, the Mustang wasn't just a great car, it was the boss. Ford Motor Company was not a follower of trends, they created them. Way before the muscle car made its appearance, back in 1962, Ford had been working on an idea aimed directly at this youth market. Instead of raw muscle, this car offered the era's most important main ingredient: image.
When the Mustang was on display outside of the Ford Rotunda at the World's Fair in 1964, they had it on a big rotisserie, and they used that setup to film a commercial called Dream Your Own Mustang. You could outfit a Mustang any way you wanted.
America, young and old, loved the Mustang. And with these good looks and a sticker price just a shade over $2,000, what was not to love? Even though its most potent power plant was a 260 cubic inch V8, people still gobbled up Mustangs to the tune of over 1 million cars in its first 2 years. But muscle cars were 800-pound gorillas. And out on the street, even a million seller like the Mustang had to buff up just to stay in the game.
If you had a small block, you were at one level. But the big guys had the 396s and the 390s and the big cube engines. And that was all a badge of honor on the street.
Thanks to a decade of racing, Ford had a room full of high horsepower engines. And most of these would wind up inside the Mustang eventually. But even with more horsepower, the Mustang's reputation was still more sporty car than muscle car. So in 1969, Ford created 2 Mustangs that took things to a whole new level. They called them Boss, and they were the product of one of the most performance-minded people in the auto industry, Bunky Knudsen. The Boss Mustang served two widely different purposes. The Boss 429 Mustang was built purely to provide a home for Ford's all-world racing engine, called, appropriately enough, the Boss 429. This engine was made to give Ford's NASCAR racers an edge over Chrysler's mighty 426 Hemi. Thanks to Bunky Knudsen, the lucky platform chosen for this duty was the 1969 Mustang. Stuffing the Boss 429 in the Mustang started out as an end run around NASCAR's rulebook. But the car that resulted from this sleight of hand was a textbook case of muscle car era overkill. The other Boss Mustang was a little more balanced, but just as potent, in a very different way. The Boss 302 was purpose-built for Trans Am racing. Its mission was to blow away Camaros and any other pony car that dared line up against it, on the track or on the street.
The point of the Boss program was twofold, really. Trans Am racing had become extremely popular, and Ford had to have something that was going to win all the marbles. So on one hand, they wanted to create a package that would win on the racetrack. On the other hand, they wanted to create a parallel package that would win in the showroom.
With one swing of the bat, the Boss could hit a triple. It could qualify the shotgun motor for NASCAR, take back Trans Am from Chevy, and revamp Mustang's street image from cute car to mean machine. But to hit all these bases, Ford had to do more than just pump up the power. They needed to create a whole new look for the Boss. For that job, Bunky called in his styling whiz kid from GM, Larry Shinoda, who reshaped the Boss bodies to fit their new image as the baddest Mustangs of all time. Stay with us as Bunky Knudsen tools up a new Mustang on the American Muscle Car. For 1969, Ford's designers had given the Mustang a more muscular look, with a full package of scoops, spoilers, rally stripes, wide wheels and tires, and all the standard muscle car gewgaws. Everyone loved the look, except Larry Shinoda. Among American automobile designers, Larry Shinoda was at the very top of the list. When Bunky Knudsen left GM in 1968 to be the president of Ford Motor Company, he brought Shinoda with him to be his point man for special design projects. Shinoda liked the Mustang, but he detested styling gimmicks, like the ones on the 69 Mustang.
He cleaned up the car, made the hood scoop functional, put the slats on the back, expanded the tire width to 7 inches. He's the one that really deserves credit, I think, for making the Boss Mustang great.
Shinoda's Mustang was cleaner, and without all the cute stuff, it looked even racier. As a final touch, he christened it with the same nickname everyone called Bunky Knudsen, the Boss. While all this bodywork was going on, Ford's Performance Engine Group was hard at work developing an engine to go into this new car. This motor was worthy of the name Boss. The Boss 302 was built on a high-strength 4-bolt main block with a 4-inch bore and a 3-inch stroke. Its cross-drilled steel crank was the best small-block crankshaft Ford ever made and would handle regular trips into the 8,000 RPM range. Special longer Boss rods mated to 10.6-to-1 pistons and a 290-degree solid lifter cam completed the short block. What made the Boss 302 into a monster were its Cleveland cylinder heads. Their huge 2.33-inch intake and 1.7-inch exhaust valves were laid out in a canted valve design, with 1.73 ratio rocker arms for increased lift. With excellent port design, these heads woke up the little 302, and with a Holley 780 carburetor on a high-rise aluminum intake manifold, the factory's rating of 290 horsepower was, in a word, sandbagging. The 302 shifted gears with Ford's bulletproof top-loader 4-speed and pulled through the equally strong 9-inch rear end. This package pulled revs so easily that Ford even installed a 6,150 RPM rev limiter to keep things together. Knudsen had one more goal for this car. It was to be the best-handling car ever to roll off Ford's assembly line.
Well, the car itself was built to race. Had the staggered rear shocks, had the sway bars front and rear, had the reinforced shock towers, which kept the car stable, had spoilers in the front, optional spoiler on the rear. Of course, the louvers were a appearance piece, but they kept the back cool during the summer months when the sun hit the back. And but basically, overall, the car was built for road racing, and was also a good drag race car.
The Boss 302 looked and behaved like the meanest Mustang in captivity. And on April 17, 1969, when Mustang lovers saw it for the first time, they knew they were looking at the Boss Hoss.
The 69 Boss 302 was the first factory-built race car that they put in the showroom. You could literally go buy the car, strip a few parts off of it, take it to the racetrack, throw a gumball on the side of it, and go race. I mean, a few safety modifications and you were there. The cars, they just ran.
While Ford had been developing the showroom version of this little hot rod, its race teams had been tooling up a few of these cars too. Stay with us. We'll load up and go to the track when the American muscle car returns. Now in its fourth year of wheel-to-wheel excitement, racing fans had discovered the Trans Am series, and so had the automakers. Roger Penske's Camaro Z28, with Mark Donohue driving, had wrestled the Trans Am title away from Ford in 1968, and it hadn't been pretty for the Blue Oval guys. But for 1969, Ford was coming back strong with two Boss Mustang teams, one with Carroll Shelby at the helm, and the other headed up by stock car racing legend Bud Moore. Bud Moore didn't just want to beat the Camaros, he wanted to beat everybody. And that included his fellow Ford racers on the Shelby team.
Carroll Shelby was out at Laguna Seca, and we got there, and all the guys said, well, you got your work cut out this week. You're not going to outrun us this week. And, oh, this, you never heard the like this. They'd been testing all that week out there. And they were, the track record was like a 1:13 something, so they was running in the low 12s, 1 minute and 12 seconds, I believe it was. So Jones, he just sort of laughed, when we got in the car. He says, I'm going to warm up faster than that. And they all laughed at him. He come around the first lap at a 1:11 something. And when it's all said and done, we sat on the pole at 1:09.
Ford leaped out to a huge lead, winning the first 5 races of the season. 1969 developed into a battle royal, with Ford and Chevrolet blazing away at each other every week. The competition between Mustang and Camaro, and sometimes Mustang against Mustang, produced some of the most exciting racing anyone had ever seen. At the end of the 69 season, when the points were tallied, Camaro had won again by just 14 points. While all this sporty car stuff was happening, halfway across the country, another type of racing was going on, and Ford was in it big time. By the mid-'60s, Ford was in a horsepower war with Chrysler's #1 racing power plant, the 426 Hemi, and they were losing. Ford fired back with a ringer of their own, a single overhead cam version of the 427.
This engine had a monstrous big hemispherical head with a single overhead cam on each cylinder head, a massive 8-foot-long chain that wraps around all the gears and all the drives. But we ran it at Ford, and it made it to a couple of races before NASCAR said, don't bring it back.
After a couple of years of rule book squabbling, Ford finally got tired of this game of horsepower one-upmanship and decided to throw down the ultimate weapon, the Boss 429. With the Boss 429 and Ford's new fastback Torino Talladega, the Blue Oval racers finally had enough horsepower to go toe-to-toe with the Hemi. But there was something wrong with this picture. NASCAR rules said that before you could put a car on the track, there had to be at least 500 of them in the marketplace. But there weren't any Boss 429 Torinos. In fact, the Boss 429 wasn't available in any car. Once again, Bunky Knudsen saw this not as a problem, but an opportunity.
Ford Engineering had developed this magnificent Boss 429 engine. Now the question was, what body were they going to put the motor in? It would have been a breeze just to bolt the engine into the Galaxy. But Bunky Knudsen insisted that it go in his pony car, the Mustang.
If making 500 Boss 429 Mustangs would satisfy NASCAR's rule book, it'd be a stretch. Almost as big a stretch as making this engine fit in the Mustang. We'll show you how they did it when the American muscle car continues. Stock car racing had always been a game of bigger is better. It was also a game of seeing how much you could get away with. With the Boss 429, Ford was really stretching the rule book. A decade of racing experience had gone into the Boss 429, and this time Ford got it all right. This engine was built to run wide open all day.
The Boss 429 was the first real race engine that Ford Motor Company built for NASCAR as such. It wasn't a modification of another thing. That Hemi head, the combustion chamber, everything was done the way we wanted it, the way the Ford engineers wanted it, and it was the best race motor Ford built. It was wonderful.
The NASCAR version of the Boss 429 was heavy-duty everywhere. The block was a special high-strength unit based on the 385 series block. With a 4.36-inch bore and a 3.59-inch stroke, it carried a forged steel crank and special NASCAR forged rods. To make 13-to-1 compression, two types of pistons were used, one for shorter tracks and a domed Hemi-style piston for higher RPM racing on the big bank superspeedways. The Boss heads were cast aluminum and used O-ring seals instead of head gaskets. The hollow stem stainless steel valves were immense, 2.37 inches for the intakes and 1.9 inches on the exhaust side. The Boss 429 Talladegas were nearly unbeatable in 1969, with Holman Moody's ace David Pearson winning NASCAR's driving championship that year. But the Boss 429 would have never seen the racetrack unless a minor miracle had taken place, finding room for this massive motor inside the Mustang's engine compartment. Unlike the Boss 302, the Boss 429 wasn't expected to set any sales records. Their production target was just 500 cars. So this project was farmed out to a company called CarCraft in nearby Brighton, Michigan. The Boss's slick body already existed, and the heavier suspension was already in place, thanks to the work done for the Boss 302. So by widening the engine compartment slightly, moving the battery to the trunk, and installing heavier front springs to compensate for the 429's extra weight, the Boss 429 was a done deal. All that remained was to install the nasty-looking hood scoop and add some subtle Boss 429 ID, and the scariest Mustang of all time was born. The two street versions of the Boss 429, labeled 820S and 820T, weren't much different from the NASCAR motor. The S motor featured a hydraulic cam, and a T version, released later in 1969, offered a hydraulic cam at first, but soon switched to the solid lifter cam from the 429 Super Cobra jet. These engines had smaller intake valves and 10.5-to-1 compression, with a Holley 735 CFM carburetor actually smaller than the Boss 302's Holley 780. This engine was rated at 375 horsepower, more Boss Mustang sandbagging.
Driving down the road at Boss with the stripes and with the sound and with the looks, they're great. I've owned Camaros, I've owned Dodges, I've owned a little bit of everything, and I just keep getting stuck back right to the Mustangs. They drive me crazy.
Racing into 1970, the Boss Mustangs had a few more months on top of the muscle car world, on the street and the racetrack. This was just enough time to settle some unfinished business in Trans Am racing. We'll be back with that story and the story of one very special Boss Mustang when the American muscle car continues. The 1970 Mustangs didn't change much from their 1969 shapes. There were minor nose and tail styling changes, including a return to the two headlight layout, and some new reflective stripes for the Boss 302. You could now get the popular shaker hood scoop, which let in a shot of cold air at full throttle, which is precisely where Boss 302s spent most of their time, especially the ones from Bud Moore Engineering. Ford had consolidated its Trans Am effort into a two-car team this year. And with Bud Moore's Mustangs under them, Parnelli Jones and George Fulmer were heat-seeking missiles.
Parnelli was one more race driver. He knew how to get around a road course.
When the smoke had cleared from the 1970 season, the Mustangs had reclaimed the championship and pony car fans had seen the most exciting season of Trans Am racing ever. While the Boss 302s were cleaning up in Trans Am, its big brother Boss 429 continued its role as the summer home of the 429 shotgun motor. After making 852 of these cars in 1969, production slowed to just 505 units in 1970. With these kind of numbers, your chances of running across a Boss 429 on the street were pretty slim. But thanks to a special program sponsored by Ford Motor Company and others, tens of thousands of young Americans got to experience the Boss 429 in a very unique way. Al Ekstrand was a corporate lawyer and a champion superstock drag racer. He was also a man with a mission.
We were losing significant numbers of returning servicemen from Vietnam in accidents with cars that they weren't capable of driving. They get mustered out of the service with, I think, $3,500, which puts you behind the wheel of a 425 horsepower car. And they were piling into embankments along motorways. And instead of being sympathized or given help, these guys were criticized. The whole thing seemed out of whack to me.
Ekstrand and a group of his friends formed the United States Performance Team and sold Ford on the idea of touring Vietnam with a convoy of high-performance cars to promote safe driving to military personnel.
What we ought to do is build a car, get some reasonable safety techniques developed and a way of presenting them to troops that they'd buy. And the fact that with the credibility that drag racing had brought me, and at least using that credibility that I had from drag racing, maybe they'd listen to what I had to say.
The Marine Corps picked up on Al's idea, and before long, Ekstrand and his hand-picked race team were in country.
The ground rules for the program were that the government would pay nothing for this. My sponsors were to foot the bill. We needed a car that was built that would stand all the rigors of what we wanted to do with it. When I wanted the car, I wanted one of them to be very, very unique that people would look at. That's why the Boss 429 came to mind.
Al's Boss ran 8-second quarter miles, blasting down everything from airstrips to helicopter landing pads. 5 other Mustangs in the troop were cars for the GIs to drive in safety demonstrations.
We ran it in various places. Airfield at Naha, Okinawa. We ran it on aircraft carriers. It was a real attention getter. And then when we got the message sold about racing, they'd listen to what we had to say about safety.
After being away from the States for a few months, a chance to get close to a good old American muscle car was good medicine for some servicemen.
Another hospital we were standing at, they brought a car to a window outside. And it was an amputee ward. Guys started to come out in crutches. They got up out of the beds, and I stood there in the ward looking out at the car, and I thought, my God, how no one realizes how powerful the automobile is to American youth.
For 3 years, Ekstrand's United States Performance Team toured bases all over Asia, from the largest and best equipped to the smallest and most remote. This troop never failed to put on a great show and bring home a little closer for muscle car fans in uniform. Al Ekstrand continues to race one of those 2 original blown Boss 429s today. The other was destroyed in transit overseas. And once in a while, he meets someone who remembers the car from his tour in Vietnam.
What made the companionship with the guys was the genuine credibility that Mustang presented to the group. We never had any trouble with it. It never gave us any difficulties, and that's the same car today.
It takes a pretty special car to make that kind of impression, but the Boss Mustangs were cars that made an impression, then and now. In the 2 years Ford made the Boss 302 and 429, they grabbed all the headlines in Trans Am racing. They combined the Mustang's sporty essence with the raw power of the muscle era. And thanks to Al Ekstrand and his team of racers, the Boss made the dream of going home and buying a muscle car a little more real for thousands of American servicemen. That's a pretty good resume for a car that was only around for a couple of years. Thanks for watching, and please don't crush them, restore them. There have been a lot of quick Mustangs through the years, but some of the fastest ones ever are made by a man named Saleen. This car is called S7. It's the fastest American production car ever built, and it's the culmination of one man's dream. That man is Steve Saleen.
It's been very satisfying at some points in time to take a passion that one would have and turn it into a business that one could make a living at. To do the kind of cars that we do, I think you have to have more than a business. You need to have a passion and a big desire to carry it through.
The S7 is a mid-engine 2,500-pound GT class race car for the street. It's the latest high-performance creation from Saleen Speed Lab, and its credentials are impressive. This carbon fiber body was developed using today's most advanced wind tunnel techniques. The Saleen design suspension uses lightweight components everywhere, and the massive 15-inch front and 14-inch rear brakes are race-ready. Despite the high-tech running gear, its lightweight steel space frame houses a pretty traditional engine. The block and heads are all aluminum, but the architecture is good old-fashioned Detroit-style horsepower, with 427 cubic inches, 2 valves per cylinder, and a camshaft in the block. At 6,400 RPM, this engine is making over 600 horsepower and feeding 550 foot-pounds of torque to the 18-inch rear wheels. At wide-open throttle, this car will top out at over 220 miles per hour. Now here's the good news. Steve Saleen will make you an S7 of your very own for around $450,000. Can we put you down for one? Obviously, the S7 isn't an entry-level muscle car. It's a world-class racing machine with just enough street-legal components to get through a DOT inspection. But the S7 is a perfect example of the Saleen mindset. First, they establish a benchmark of performance. Then, they design a car that hits that mark. Finally, when off-the-shelf parts can't do the job, they build parts that can. This is a corporate attitude that comes from years of endurance racing.
Endurance racing is very good if you are in the business of building production cars, which is what we are. Endurance racing and sports car racing is one of the best you can on a production base, because what it does, it focuses on the weak parts of the car and allows you as a manufacturer to build a stronger car tomorrow.
At nearly $500,000 a copy, there's not much chance you'll be fighting with an S7 for a parking space at the mall. But there are plenty of people who want the same kind of white-knuckles driving with a more affordable price tag. And for them, there's the Saleen S281. A perfect balance of Detroit's best ideas, raised to a higher level by the high-performance fanatics at Saleen. The S281 is just one of a parade of Saleen supercars that have re-established the Ford Mustang as one of the winningest cars on America's racetracks, and a kick-in-the-pants street fighter. The S7, the S281, and all the other Saleen cars grew out of Steve Saleen's dream of building his own brand of muscle car. A dream that dates back to 1984, when Steve was a young man with a need to go fast. And Ford was a company whose performance image was in desperate need of rebuilding. We'll go there when the American muscle car returns. When the Mustang invaded the automotive scene in 1964, it had everything going for it, except muscle. But its great looks and young person appeal still sent almost 1 million buyers into Ford showrooms in its first 2 years. But almost immediately, big cubic inch competition from GM and Chrysler dragged the Mustang into a horsepower race. Never one to back down from this kind of a fight, Ford soon unleashed a string of muscle Mustangs, starting with the high-performance K-Code 289, which cranked out 271 horsepower at 6,000 RPM. About this same time, Steve Saleen was discovering how much fun muscle cars could be.
Growing up as a kid in Southern California, I grew up looking at all the hot cars that were coming out, primarily from Detroit, but then looking at Porsche was big, looking at Ferraris, Lotus, a lot of the imports was very exciting as well. And I think that all had a big influence on my perspective of cars.
While Saleen was exploring all the fast cars he could get his hands on, Ford was continuing to build the Mustang into a first-class muscle car. Mustang was now packing the highest horsepower engines in Ford's stable, with everything from 390s all the way up to the mighty Cobra Jet 428. But as potent as these ground pounders were, the Mustangs that grabbed all the attention were the ones built and raced by the godfather of American sports car racing, Carroll Shelby. In the early 60s, Shelby had taken a little British sports car called the AC Bristol, replaced its four-cylinder engine with Ford's Hypo 289, and blew away the competition in U.S. road racing. He called it the Cobra. Shelby leveraged this race car building success and his relationship with Ford into another project based on that K-Code Mustang. Shelby's race package improved the car's suspension and heated up the 289 even more to make 306 horsepower. As soon as it hit the track, the Shelby GT350 immediately started cleaning up in SCCA racing. For a young man like Steve Saleen, who wanted to get into racing, the Shelby Mustang was made to order.
Shelby certainly had, in the mid-60s there, had all the ingredients that really catapulted him above and beyond the rest.
Driving a Shelby Mustang, Saleen won the first race he ever entered. And from there, his need for speed drove him to even faster cars. In the next few years, he raced everything from Super V to Trans Am, going pro in the Formula Atlantic Series, where he set 13 records and finished third in the championship. But by 1983, racing had taught Steve Saleen two things. One, it cost a fortune. And two, he could build a better car than he was currently driving. So in 1984, Saleen Autosport was formed. And like Carroll Shelby nearly 20 years earlier, the car he would build would be based on the Mustang.
I had always had an affinity with Ford. Mustangs were close to my heart. Knowing what the base car represented and where I could take the base vehicle from a performance standpoint, decided that we'll go down the road with Ford here.
Saleen's first-generation Mustang included a full aero package and his own racecraft suspension, along with a few creature comfort upgrades. At a little over $13,000, the first edition Saleen sold just 3 cars. But a tradition had been born that year. Ultra-quick Fords from Saleen, every one of them with its very own Saleen sequence number. For the next 2 years, Saleen Autosports concentrated on improving their racecraft suspension and their manufacturing operation. The car's distinctive appearance package of side stripes, Saleen identification, and wide wheels and tires blended with the interior upgrades to make Saleen Mustangs a cut above the showroom cars. But what really put these cars on the map was their racing success.
We won the whole championship in 1987, and that really started putting us on the map.
Sales topped out at 608 cars for the first 4 years, and this figure more than doubled in 1988. In addition to building a dealer network, Saleen was now building a strong group of loyal owners. Just as Steve Saleen had forecast, racing had done a number of good things for his cars. It had attracted the attention of the enthusiast community. It had built their reputation as serious muscle car builders, and racing had developed the Saleen Mustang into a full-on street fighter. The formula was working. Stay with us as Saleen celebrates the 25th anniversary of the Mustang in a very special way on the American Muscle Car. By 1989, Saleen Mustangs were no longer a novelty on the streets or the racetrack. The word was out. These things went fast, and they handled great. The time was right to crank it up even more with a special Saleen, just in time for the Mustang's 25th birthday, the SSC. If the original Saleen Mustangs were great cars, the SSC was a supercar. In addition to the usual Saleen goodies, great handling and brakes, the aero package, and a killer stereo, this car packed more punch under the hood than any Saleen car yet. The Mustang's 302 cubic inch engine was treated to a set of tubular headers, a low restriction exhaust system, and a 65 millimeter throttle body. These upgrades helped this little screamer produce 300 net horsepower. Out back, 355 gears gave it a real boost off the line, and 16-inch wheels with General 225s up front and 245s on the rear stuck it to the ground. In addition to the 160 SSCs built in 1989, Saleen also created 731 regular models, which sold for considerably less than the SSC's $36,500 base price. By now, the Saleen formula was well established. Cornering like it's on rails, fantastic looks, and the full-on luxury treatment inside. Saleen delivered on the last part of this promise with interiors that featured flow-fit seats, a Momo steering wheel, leather upholstery with embroidered Saleen logos, a full gauge package, and a full boogie stereo system. Even though Saleen's 302 cubic inch engine was still very much standard issue Ford, its 6-second 0 to 60 times and its 14.5 second quarter miles were the product of improved breathing on the intake and exhaust sides. With a top speed of over 150 miles per hour, the Saleen Mustangs had bridged the gap between nice American car and world-class sports racer. And that's where Steve Saleen had wanted to go from the beginning. He did it with a great design and good old American muscle.
I always felt that the American V8 was the better choice to go with, and history, I think, has proven that to be a wiser decision.
But unlike many muscle cars, the Saleen's performance didn't come purely from a mega-powered engine. The difference between Saleen's and ordinary Mustangs was a careful blending of individual pieces to create a car that excelled at everything. The racecraft suspension was designed to make the Mustang handle like a race car, and every piece from the special springs and Monroe shocks to the suspension bushings to its chassis stiffening components worked together to help the Saleen generate some eyeball flattening cornering forces. And unlike many of today's racing models, Saleen's aero package wasn't just a cosmetic feature. It all worked, from the side skirts and spoilers to the front air dam and rear valance. This ground-up approach toward building cars is unique to Saleen, and it dates back to their first days as car builders.
I always focus on building a complete car. We focus on the Mustang, improving it in areas that I felt we could add value added from the consumer standpoint. That was in the aerodynamics, was in the suspension, was in the interior ergonomics. By doing a complete car, certifying it, putting a serial number on it from the get-go was always our main focus and main objective.
By the early 90s, the Fox-bodied Mustangs were getting a little long in the tooth, styling-wise. But Ford's special vehicles operations had made this little ride into a pretty mean muscle car, and Ford was selling over 200,000 of them a year at a sticker price of around $15,000. Steve Saleen's Ultimate Mustang was packing a $25,990 price tag. Even though the Saleen was literally rolling off showroom floors and winning SCCA races, the recession of the early 90s took a big bite out of Saleen's sales. Between 90 and 92, less than 400 Saleens were built. But even during this time, the car continued to develop into a more amazing package. Saleen celebrated their 10th anniversary in 1993, and their latest and best development, the Saleen SC, rolled out with even more performance. 17 by 9-inch wheels with 45 series tires, Saleen SVO 4-wheel disc brakes, and new racecraft struts and springs improved the car's already excellent handling. And the new 2-tier rear spoiler and bold graphics told the world that this was a horse of a much different color. Under the hood, a Saleen-designed intake manifold with a huge 77mm airflow sensor and upgraded fuel delivery and ignition systems helped the 5-liter Mustang engine develop 304 horsepower and 326 foot-pounds of torque. Even though times were hard, Saleen's don't-back-down attitude still showed. Their sales literature stated, if you drive a Saleen, you win. Everything else is just watching. Stay with us. We'll watch and drive the next generation of Saleen Mustangs when the American muscle car continues. For the Saleen Mustangs, it was the best of times and the worst of times. The early 90s were scary times for anyone building supercars, and Saleen was no exception. Still, though, the heartbeat of competition was strong, and this resulted in some exceptional cars. Thanks to this spirit, the company emerged as a stronger, tighter organization, just in time to work its magic on another new Mustang. Once again, racing was key to the car's development. Team Saleen wasn't just getting their jollies out there on the racetrack, they were building a database. And once again, Saleen Mustangs were winning everything in sight.
We really needed to have the pedigree, if you will, of the racing, I think, to help elevate us to further our sales on the street side.
Saleen Performance, as the company was now called, was ready to unveil another special supercar. And this time the accent was on pure muscle, the S351. In addition to the usual Saleen handling and aerodynamics, the S351's Windsor crate motor finally provided enough cubic inches to make this car a bonsai street machine. But for good measure, they leaned on the 351 just a little, with a specially designed roller cam, Edelbrock aluminum heads, and Ford SVO upper and lower intakes. Ceramic-coated headers and a Borla exhaust system helped this engine produce over 370 horsepower at 5,100 RPM and 422 foot-pounds of torque at 3,500 RPM. For hardcore muscle car fans, an optional supercharger was available, which raised horsepower to 480 and made the S351 a true cruise missile. And of course, the racecraft suspension still turned in skid pad numbers that would make a Porsche driver envious. Among all the special order supercars, the Saleen ranks at the very top of the touch and feel scale. And Saleen's interior treatment was as posh as European cars, costing several times as much. Even with all the new power, Saleen's focus stayed fixed on building the perfect car in every area of performance, from quickness to driver comfort. The S281 rolled out in 1996 as a lower-priced entry into the Saleen stable with exceptional bang for the buck. It's got all the Saleen goodies at a price that puts it in the range of many of today's factory racers whose performance is mostly cosmetic. The Saleens of the late 90s represented the highest level of performance from any Saleen yet. But far from being through, they had even more exciting cars ready to roll out. And it was getting harder to tell the race cars from the street cars. In fact, that was part of the plan. Stay with us as we go racing, or cruising, or all of the above, on the American Muscle Car. Saleen ended the decade of the 90s in a very different place than they were going in. From a low of just 17 cars produced during 1992, the 90s ended for Saleen with 4 back-to-back SCCA Manufacturers Championships, including the FIA Championship in Spain. The Saleen Allen Speed Lab racing team, formed with TV star and auto enthusiast Tim Allen, had raced successfully at Le Mans and had won the SCCA Drivers' Championship in 1998. Since its debut a few months earlier, the racing world had been waiting to see the S7 on the racetrack. The car performed exactly as advertised, with wins at both Sebring and Donington Park. Just like Saleen promised, racing has provided solid engineering for their street cars. Development has continued on all the Saleens, and for 2001, the Saleen Speedsters turn it up even more. The S281 is built around the smaller 4.6-liter Ford engine. Its high revving characteristics are reminiscent of a legendary 289, which powered the early Hi-Po Mustangs and Shelbys. In a car like the S281, it's a perfect blend of lightweight and big horsepower. This engine makes over 365 horsepower, thanks to a good old hot rod speed secret, a supercharger. The big difference here is the charge from this blower goes through a Saleen-designed intercooler. The S281 contains a feature that dates back to their first car, the individual serial number. This little number, always found on the left front corner of the car, is a very important part of the Saleen Mustang. Saleens are some of the best documented cars ever built. And as they pass from owner to owner, this number is like a pedigree, helping to trace the car's lineage. As Saleens become more valuable as collector classics, being able to identify a genuine Saleen takes on even more importance. Like all the Saleens since the very first one, the S281 is a perfect example of why Saleens are so prized by their owners and why the Saleen name is so respected by high-performance enthusiasts. But the Saleen customer isn't Joe Everybody, which is why the company's slogan is power in the hands of a few.
I think that Saleen has mastered the design of the Mustang, in my opinion. Of course, I'm a little biased, I guess, but with the design, you have the performance. And I don't know, it just wraps up a muscle car. You get a little bit of everything.
Debbie Blaylock has been a Mustang lover all her life. Today, she owns 3 Saleen Mustangs and also helps coordinate Saleen's owners clubs.
And you cruise down the street, no matter where you go, if it's downtown, the country road, wherever, you are the baddest around. And that's what I like about it, because I like to be bad.
That pretty much says it all. Advanced technology, blended with the best of good old American go-fast, creating cars that carve up the corners and reach out and grab you with a rumble that only comes from a muscle car. What else would you expect from a kid that grew up in Southern California during the 60s?
Now I have to ask you, who has more fun than I do? Let's go for a ride.
Thanks for watching. And remember, don't crush them, restore them.
During the muscle era, no matter what kind of muscle car you drove, it wasn't for real unless it was Hurst equipped. When you think back to the muscle car years, a lot of great images come to mind. But one name said muscle car like no other. That name was Hurst. For nearly 40 years, Hurst has meant high performance and bulletproof quality. They earned this reputation by making one of the muscle car era's favorite products, the Hurst shifter. But Hurst wasn't just a shifter manufacturer. Hurst's contribution to the muscle era was much more far-reaching. Hurst was an innovator in creating life-saving safety equipment. Their support for drag racing during its early years put this little sport on the map. And they've partnered with practically every American car maker to build some of the most unique muscle cars ever created. All of these achievements grew from the vision of one man, George Hurst. Dick Chrysler started with Hurst in 1966, and his duties included washing the cars and sweeping the floors. By 1981, he owned the company. He credits his business success to the time he spent working with George Hurst.
There will never be another George Hurst. There are people like that that have that vision. They come along once in a lifetime, and you can only thank God that you had the chance to work with them and learn from them.
George Hurst made this world a whole lot better place to be by being here.
Jack Watson was George Hurst's go-to guy for their special projects, but most people know him as Doc Watson, Hurst's shifty doctor. He remembers how George Hurst got things done.
We found great talent in people who just would work unbelievably hard. In growing a sport, you have to raise the purses. Well, the one thing that the funny cars and the wheel standers and the other things, they brought sponsors, and those sponsors spent money.
Cars like the Hurst Olds, with its upscale look and feel and power to burn, were proof of this little company's ability to design and build high-style muscle cars. On the opposite end of the spectrum, cars like the Hemi Barracuda showed that Hurst could focus on pure, straight-line performance. Maybe cars like the wild, wheel-standing Hemi Under Glass revealed the most about this diverse company. George Hurst believed in performance, but he loved promotion.
George Hurst saw it as an absolute platform that was his stage. It was a quarter-mile-long stage.
Hurst promotions, like the Hemi Under Glass, made a day at the drag races special for thousands of fans. But to make sure nobody ever forgot the name Hurst, they also employed one of motorsport's most effective spokespersons, Miss Linda Vaughn.
George Hurst was drag racing, and we did turn Hurst into a household word.
With this blend of engineering, high performance, imagination, and public relations, the fun things built by George Hurst and his dedicated team of hot rodders injected a lot of excitement into the muscle car era. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll see how it all started on the American muscle car. If you had a hot car in the 50s, you probably had one big headache, that factory gear shift. Factory shifters were the weak link between the engine and the pavement, but George Hurst had a better idea. Hurst started his automotive business in 1954, and in 1958 he joined forces with a brilliant engineer named Bill Campbell. In addition to working on cars, their little company, now called Hurst Campbell, made a number of small products, like motor mounts and bumper guards for Volkswagen buses. But Hurst had been tinkering with another gadget, a floor-mounted gear shifter. The Hurst shifter was a jewel, meticulous construction, and innovations like reverse lockout, which prevented throwing the transmission into reverse by mistake, made Hurst's floor shifters instant favorites with hot rodders. In just a few years, the gleaming stick with Hurst stamped onto it was a status symbol among hot rodders all over America. Even then, George Hurst knew the importance of creating a strong brand name.
Strongest, one of the best shifters. The racers still use them today. It was a masterful piece of engineering.
A Hurst shifter was a bona fide speed part. Most of the cars at the drags were now banging gears with Hurst shifters. And with hundreds of race cars showing the Hurst decal, George Hurst realized how important it was for his equipment to work perfectly every time. So Hurst put together a rolling machine shop, setting up in the pits at major events, dispensing hospitality to the racers, and providing free technical assistance. By 1964, the big three automakers were starting to build cars aimed directly at these young drag racing fans. Detroit's new muscle cars had big-inch motors, heavy-duty transmissions, and all the hot rod goodies built in. But since Hurst shifters were the standard of the high-performance industry, the marketing people realized they could capitalize on Hurst's good image with muscle car buyers.
You're going to a party. If you want to have fun, go with somebody that everybody knows. And so the way that Pontiac or Rolls or Buick in time could become involved in this enthusiast market was to get involved with Hurst.
Before long, just about every muscle car had one of George Hurst's beautiful chrome 4-speeds shifting its gears, which further enhanced the company's already strong reputation for making unbreakable equipment. Hurst's growing line of high-performance equipment also included a high-performance shifter for automatic transmissions called the Dual Gate, and one of the most outrageous custom wheels ever made, known simply as the Hurst wheel. By the mid-'60s, Hurst products were the gold standard of performance parts. But as innovative as George Hurst was as an engineer, he was even more gifted as a promoter. Building the Hurst name was a joint effort, a blend of good products and clever showmanship. We'll ask Hurst's best ambassador to help us with that story when the American muscle car returns.
I don't sing and I don't dance, but I can sure shift your gears.
In 1966, drag racing was big-time motorsports. In less than 20 years, it had risen up from its greasy knuckles roots to be a multi-million-dollar televised sport. One of the prime movers in this transformation was George Hurst. From racer support like the performance clinics to lavish giveaways like cash prizes and free cars, Hurst created hundreds of promotions which poured money into drag racing and kept the company name in front of the fans. By far, though, the most visible and effective promotion was Miss Hurst Golden Shifter.
So George Hurst was like an uncle to me, or a dad at times, and Jack Duffy, the PR director, just took me under his wing, and I really became a part of the family.
Linda Vaughn began her career with Hurst in 1966. Her image as Hurst's Golden Girl is one of the best-known symbols of the muscle car era and was instrumental in making Hurst a household name among car enthusiasts.
I make sure if I see a 57 Chevrolet pull up, or a Hurst Oldsmobile, or a Pontiac Oldsmobile, all American-made cars, I got my nose in there to see if it's got a Hurst shifter in it. 99% of the time, it still does.
Linda Vaughn continues today as one of racing's most memorable personalities. But not all of Hurst's promotions were this polite and lovely. Some were just plain rowdy. The Hemi Under Glass was born in 1965, another creation of the fertile mind of Doc Watson.
The Hemi Under Glass evolved because we were in the early iteration stages of helping Chrysler develop their funny car program. I always looked for names that I could put an H in the first of it, so it gave me a legitimate reason to stick the Hurst logo there. The next thing I knew is we're out at New Baltimore sticking Barracuda straight up in there and says, oh, this is neat.
The Hemi Under Glass immediately became the world's favorite exhibition dragster. Its trips down the quarter mile on two wheels brought everyone to their feet. And on days when the car would perform, drag strip owners were guaranteed standing room only crowds. For sheer outrageousness, though, nothing could top this car. A twin-engine, four-wheel drive 66 Olds 442. Its name described the car perfectly, the Hairy Oldsmobile.
It was a tough car.
The Hairy Olds became the most awesome exhibition car to ever roar down the drag strip. Two blown 425 Oldsmobile engines received the full-on racing treatment, using parts from Milodon, Mickey Thompson, and Iskandarian, among others. To create Harry's frame, two Olds Tornado front flips were tied together with a roll cage, and the engines were installed with one in the normal position and the other behind the driver. Each engine drove two wheels through Olds Tornado transaxles. These engines spun all four M&H slicks through the length of the drag strip, taking driver Gentleman Joe Schubeck on some of the wildest rides ever seen on a drag strip or anywhere else.
Harry went where Harry wanted to go. I mean, Harry went in the ditch in Sand Air, went through 3 cornfields and almost ended up in a barn in New Baltimore. We never knew where Harry was going.
Harry joined the Hemi Under Glass on the touring circuit, and no one who ever saw either car perform will ever forget the experience. But most of the cars Hurst made for the drag strip didn't make exhibition runs, although their competition wished they had. In 1968, Chrysler Corporation and Hurst came up with a couple cars designed to dominate the superstock classes, the Hemi Dart and the Hemi Barracuda.
We built 150 of those cars, 80 Darts and 70 Barracudas. Literally brought them into our facility on a tow truck, no engine, no transmission in them. Pulled the rear end out from underneath them and put in a heavy-duty rear end, and put fiberglass fenders and hoods on them, acid dip doors, lightweight windows. Of course, the Hemi engine and the transmission with a Hurst shifter in them. And they were the best and fastest stock vehicle you could buy.
But without a doubt, the cars that people remember as the Hurst cars are these, the Hurst Oldsmobiles. Starting in 1968, these cars became some of the most desirable muscle cars ever made and elevated Hurst from being an equipment manufacturer to being a maker of high-performance, hand-built specialty vehicles. We'll get inside one when the American muscle car returns. The Olds 442 was a spectacular muscle car. Powerful engine, gorgeous looks, great handling. It would take some ambitious thinking to make this car any better. But Hurst was known for that kind of thinking. What George Hurst was after was an executive hot rod. A tricked-up 442 featuring the bad boy 455 cubic inch engine instead of the usual 400 motor would fill this bill nicely. Hurst immediately saw the possibilities, and so did Oldsmobile, who gave the go-ahead to make 500 cars. But there were a couple of problems. To make it to the dealers before the end of the '68 model year, they had to make all of them in just 30 days.
By the time I got the program approved, there was no time, and I needed a building.
Ted Lucas, Oldsmobile's chief engineer at the time, remembers how they solved these little issues.
That was a creative thing, believe me. I introduced Doc to John Demmer.
John was already a supplier to General Motors, and John was also an enthusiast.
Then we got the cars out and shipped them over to John Demmer to put the shifter in, put the stripes on it and the wing on it.
This was a picture of the '68 cars. This is at a Demmer facility, and you can see this is not the height of automation.
There was one more minor detail. GM had a policy that prevented engines larger than 400 cubic inches in intermediate cars. But Doc Watson had a fix for that one, too.
And for everybody that wants to know, they already had the 455s in them.
The Olds 455 prescribed by the doctor was heated up especially for this application. It featured a 474 lift cam, the big valve heads from the 442, a rejetted Rochester quadrajet carb, and a recurve distributor. The 442's force air induction system helped this engine make 390 horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque. The car was otherwise standard-issue Olds 442, but needless to say, they all featured a Hurst shifter. Since Olds wasn't geared up to do Hurst's signature gold color, the '68 Hurst Olds came in Peruvian silver, with a special black accent stripe and the black rear panel laid on at Demmer. These were highlighted by white pinstripes, and every one was hand-painted by a fellow named Paul Hatton, who performed this work at the princely sum of $20 per car. By the end of the fast and furious 30 days, 515 of these cars had been built. But thanks to the power of the Hurst trademark, Olds dealers had placed orders for nearly 3,000 of them. Because of this demand and the media attention attracted by this marriage of Olds and Hurst, for 1969, Hurst rolled out 914 copies, including 2 convertibles. The '69 car received a more Hurst-like paint scheme, with fire frost gold stripes on its white body. Cold air to the 455 now came from an outrageous dual inlet hood scoop, and a functional rear wing now sat on the deck lid. Other special touches to the '69 Hurst Olds included English-style racing mirrors, custom headrests, and 60 series tires on 15-inch Olds rally wheels. The '72 Hurst Olds enjoyed the honor of being the first Indianapolis 500 pace car to be produced not by a major automaker, but by a specialty company. It continued the tradition of the executive hot rod, with 499 coupes and 120 convertibles getting the treatment this year. Over the next 15 years, 7 more versions of the Hurst Olds were created. Each one showed the special style that only a team of hot rodders, led by a man named Hurst, could bring to the project. The Hurst Olds today sits at the top of the must-have list for every classic car collector. And each one, from 1968 to 1984, is exactly what George Hurst, Doc Watson, Dick Chrysler, and the rest of their team intended it to be. The muscle car, raised to the next level.
They represented the excitement and the passion that people have for automobiles today would belong to the person who bought it.
Hurst had now grown into the muscle car era's first mega company, and they were just getting limbered up. Stay with us for some of Hurst's most unique rides when the American muscle car continues. Even though they were best known around America's drag strips, Hurst was a player in every type of American motorsports, from Indy to Bonneville. In 1965, the Summers brothers led an assault on the land speed record with this car, the Goldenrod. Powered by 4 Chrysler Hemi engines, the Goldenrod posted a new record of over 409 miles per hour, with much of the engineering coming from Hurst Research and Development. But drag racing was still George Hurst's first love. And in 1969, American Motors came in for a shot of that love. What resulted was the AMX SS, a takeoff on the Hemi Barracudas and Darts from years earlier. 53 AMXs, minus a lot of heavy things they'd never need as full-on drag cars, like front fender supports, the front sway bar, hood hinges, and even a horn, were delivered to Hurst Performance Research. When they rolled out, they were legal superstockers with heavy-duty 444 rear ends, a Lakewood scatter shield, and, of course, a Hurst shifter. Under the hood, the AMX 390 got the full treatment, with special crane cylinder heads, an Edelbrock intake manifold, and 2 Holley 650s, Doug's headers, and a high-capacity cooling system. Racers like Wally Booth and Shirley the Dragon Lady Shahan campaigned these Hurst AMXs all through the 1969 season, and the excitement generated by this car led to another AMC Hurst creation, but this one was for the street. American Motors was always known for its economy-minded cars. This wasn't one of them. The little Rambler Rogue was outfitted with the AMX's 315 horsepower, 390 cubic inch engine. Behind this came a Borg-Warner 4-speed transmission, shifted by, you guessed it, a Hurst shifter, and a twin-grip 354 rear axle. This much torque in this little car, which just barely weighed in at 3,000 pounds, was a rocket launch. With its in-your-face red, white, and blue paint job and a wink toward those who made Rambler jokes, they called this car the Hurst Scrambler. Slated for an initial run of 500 cars, the Scrambler soon became an out-of-stock item at your local AMC dealer. So Hurst tooled up another 1,012 of these little sleds with a more sedate but equally patriotic paint scheme. Hurst's last collaboration with Chrysler in the 60s was a big one, over 4,000 pounds to be exact. The 1969 Chrysler 300 Hurst enjoys the distinction of being the fastest letter car ever built, and certainly the most massive Hurst car ever created. A fiberglass power bulge hood and a trick rear deck spoiler, gold 15-inch Chrysler road wheels with trim rings, and Hurst ID badges everywhere made this car immediately recognizable as not just another big Chrysler, but something truly special. With its 375-horse 440 Magnum power plant and all of Chrysler's top-of-the-line Imperial options, the 300 Hurst was a great way to pay tribute to a memorable car. Hurst and Pontiac had been good friends since the early 60s and had enjoyed many successful ventures together. So in 1970, the two companies revived this old friendship with a very cool car called the Grand Prix SSJ. Starting with a white or black Grand Prix Model J optioned according to the buyer's taste, Hurst applied fire frost gold paint accents to the hood, roof, and deck, installed a power sunroof and the vinyl Landau top, and completed the assembly according to the customer's order, with options like Hurst roll control, a digital computer, and even a mobile phone. You could order your SSJ with bench seats or a console and buckets. But either way, the turbo-hydromatic transmission was shifted with, imagine that, a Hurst shifter. The Grand Prix SSJ was one of the more rare cars from Hurst, and just about 200 cars were done between 1970 and 72. As the 70s progressed and the high-performance industry succumbed to pressures to tone it down a little, Hurst, like all of us, would undergo some changes. George Hurst left the company he built in 1970, and after changing hands a couple of times, in 1981, Hurst was acquired by Cars and Concepts, a company created by former Hurst employee Dick Chrysler.
I was always in love with the company. I always loved it. I always wanted to work there right from the get-go, and I felt that if I had the opportunity to buy the company, I would, and it came on the market. You know, it was just a natural fit for it, to find a home for it.
For the next 6 years, under Chrysler's leadership, the Hurst Olds program was revived, making some of the decade's best performing and most collectible cars. Doc Watson left Hurst in the late 60s and is an engineering design consultant today, working on everything from alternative fuels to concept cars. The big joy of his life these days is helping his kids with their careers. Sadly, in ill health for some years, George Hurst passed on in 1986, and with him passed an era. George Hurst helped create a time in America when cars were more excitement than plain transportation. Drag racing was more fun than big business, and there was room in the world for people who dreamed big dreams. The cars from Hurst are just a few of the gifts left to us by this man of vision. They were his way of sharing the Hurst magic with all of us. Thanks for watching, and remember, don't crush them, restore them. In the post-muscle car era, cars have to be more than just fast. They have to be street legal. Back when the muscle car was born, the name of the game was run what you brung and hope you brung enough. The door was wide open for manufacturers to do just about anything they wanted to make a car go faster. But in the early 70s, high performance gave way to the need for lower exhaust emissions. Getting these mega-powered engines to meet federal emission standards was difficult and expensive. So most automakers just stopped making fast cars. Even aftermarket hot rod parts had to be certified emissions-friendly. This was the new reality, and it brought with it the end of America's first muscle car era. That's the way things were for nearly 20 years, until a company called SLP Engineering reinvented the process of making horsepower. SLP stands for Street Legal Performance, and putting muscle back into GM's cars was their objective. But in this new high-tech world, this required a high-tech solution. Fortunately for muscle car fans, SLP is all about high-tech solutions.
There are always people who want more. I mean, that's pretty much the American way. And SLP stepped up just like the early guys did, Berger, Yenko, and all those guys. SLP is really the new tradition of aftermarket performance.
SLP Engineering launched into the high-performance arena in the mid-'80s with a new design induction and exhaust system for the General Motors 305 cubic inch small block engine. Made especially for the Firebird and Camaro, these street-legal bolt-on parts increased the 305's horsepower and torque by over 10%. This was the first ray of high-performance sunshine for F-body owners since the glory days of the early 70s. Most importantly, SLP's close relationship with General Motors took much of the guesswork out of building a faster Firebird. SLP parts were available through GM service departments. They could be dealer installed, and the cost of the modifications could even be financed in with the cost of the car purchase. In this new high-tech world, this was the way to go hot rodding.
One of the scary things about fuel injection and computer control is the average enthusiast thought that they couldn't modify them at all. The engines respond to the same things that the early engines do. You just have to go about it in a slightly different way. SLP showed everyone it could be done.
Today, SLP has evolved into a supercar builder, making turnkey hot rods for people who want that old muscle car punch to go along with the looks and the handling of today's cars. In their new high-tech manufacturing facilities, Camaros become SLP Camaro Supersports, and Firebirds become SLP Firehawks, in a process that upgrades every part of the car.
What we're trying to do is provide high performance, reliability, unique styling, performance, and handling that the average enthusiast can afford.
Along with the drivetrain and suspension enhancements, aerodynamic body parts and free-flowing intake and exhaust complete the SLP treatment, turning GM's hot F-body cars into thrill machines that actually outperform the legendary 60s muscle cars. In addition to the Camaro SS and the Firehawk, SLP creates special versions of the Pontiac Grand Prix, a V6-powered Camaro RS, and 2 sport trucks based on the GMC Express and the Chevy Seeker. To those who said you couldn't get performance out of emissions-legal engines, the cars from SLP are a revelation. And for those who never experienced a real 60s ground pounder, these new Millennium muscle cars are a chance to have the kind of horsepower under their foot they'd only heard about in bench racing sessions. All of this happened, and is happening today, because a group of people, led by an old hot rodder named Ed Hamburger, believed the muscle car era wasn't dead.
Ed's got a long tradition of motorsports. He was a racer back in the 60s, 70s. In the late 80s, Ed had some ideas about what to do to provide a little bit more performance and actually better fuel economy and lower emissions. In 1987, he formed SLP Engineering. And the whole goal behind SLP Engineering was to provide emissions-legal products that added performance and also had the level of durability that the OE would respect.
When we return, we'll show you how SLP brought back the muscle car on the American Muscle Car. The third-generation Camaro and Firebird were long-awaited technological breakthrough cars. After several years of engines strangled by emissions controls, the new technology of computer-controlled, tune-port fuel injection was breathing new life into these power plants.
It really turned the corner when they started using electronic fuel injection. In 1985, GM introduced the tune-port induction engine. That was really a big step forward as far as performance is concerned. They'd finally learned how to balance performance with emissions. As a side benefit, drivability was improved, cold starting was improved. Really, electronic fuel injection and computer controls have transformed the internal combustion engine.
TPI engines were tuned for maximum torque and horsepower at lower RPMs. This made for fun launches and good stoplight-to-stoplight performance, but they ran out of breath at about 4,500 RPM. A supercar needed an engine that would pull hard to around $6,000. This is where the SLP engineers started work.
So SLP came out with new runners, came out with exhaust systems, camshaft design, things like that that really made the TPI engine a lot happier throughout the rev range.
Not all of the 305's performance improvements came from the good old days, though. A major part of SLP's tweaking was pure 21st century computer magic. SLP was one of the first companies to analyze their modifications for maximum engine performance in every gear. These new parts, along with a free-flowing 3-inch exhaust system and a new cold air intake system, which improved airflow to the engine as much as 30%, immediately upped the 305's output by 50 horsepower. Best of all, where the stock TPI motors fell off at 4,500, SLP modified engines pulled strongly all the way to the red line. SLP performance packages were available as dealer-installed options on new Firebirds or over-the-counter from GM Service Parts System.
When you can get a relationship with someone like an SLP and you can utilize their engineers and then have our engineers verify the data and share with them what we know about the car, that's when you get some really incredible things done.
With GM's stamp of approval, SLP's parts were politically correct in every sense of the word. They worked with and not against the car's pollution control equipment. They made GM's tuned port engines more efficient. And efficiency means more power. And SLP equipment didn't even void the car's warranty.
For many years in the aftermarket, parts were stamped for off-highway use only. And that was kind of a wink-wink. The person bought the parts and he knew what he was doing. But if the parts broke or if they caused, more importantly, some other parts in the drive line in front of it or behind it to break, you were on your own. And Ed Hamburger, our owner and founder, to his credit, as a business strategy said, our parts are going to be street legal and they're going to be emissions compliant and they're going to provide better performance.
SLP had the new smog legal engines scienced out and was now among the forefront of speed equipment manufacturers. But by the early 90s, America's automakers were back to their old high-performance fun and games. Detroit technology had caught up with the rest of the world, and the new fun machines from General Motors were starting to have that old muscle car feel. Even the #1 litmus test for muscle cars, straight-line acceleration, was coming back. Muscle car fans from the good old days and a whole new crop of high-tech road warriors were taking American iron back to the streets again. For SLP's engineers, these new cars were a great place to start making their kind of horsepower. But once again, SLP had a bigger vision. They wanted to build a car that would offer all-world performance at a reasonable cost. Stay with us as SLP gets radical with a new car called the Firehawk when the American muscle car returns. The ZR1 Corvette had been Detroit's cutting-edge car since it first rolled out in 1990. Its double overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinder aluminum block 350 was the be-all and end-all in American performance. This engine cranked out 375 horsepower in street trim, and the Vette's handling was race-ready. Duplicating the performance of the ZR1 in an automobile costing half as much would be a nice trick if they could pull it off. But SLP's high-tech hot rodders were up to the task. As a baseline for their modifications, they chose the 1992 Firebird. This car already offered blurred vision handling and bonsai straight-line acceleration. But when it rolled out as the new SLP Firehawk, it was a steel-bodied Corvette.
Those cars were very special. They were built really for showroom stock racing. They had highly modified L98 TPI engines that made 350 horsepower. You could get them with competition Brembo brakes. You could get them with roll bars, no back seat, a ton of chassis modifications. That was really the most hard-edged F-body you've ever been able to buy. It was reflected in the price, of course, but if you look back in the history of F-body performance, the 92 Firehawk has to be at the top.
To create the Firehawk, the Firebird's factory drivetrain was removed, and in its place went a special high-strength 4-bolt main 5.7-liter block, a forged crank, the Hypo pink rods and LT1 pistons, and a custom-ground SLP roller cam. On top of the short block, SLP added a set of ported cylinder heads with 2-inch intake and 1.56-inch exhaust valves. A special T-Ram port injection intake manifold with tuned intake runners and a larger throttle body fed the charge into the cylinders, and a set of stainless steel headers fed the big SLP exhaust system. This engine made 350 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 390 foot-pounds of torque at 4,400, and would pull strongly all the way to the 6,000 RPM red line. Getting all this new power to the ground required another upgrade. The ZF 6-speed gearbox from the Corvette, a Dana 44 rear end with 354 gears, and Ronal wheels with P275 40 ZR17 rubber made sure this car would hook up on the launch and stick in the turns. All this performance came with a hefty price tag, though, nearly $40,000. The Formula Firebird's base price was around $19,000, and the Firehawk conversion ran it up another $20,000, pricing it out of the range of most Firebird buyers. This first Firehawk was exactly what SLP had promised, a car that offered Corvette-style performance costing thousands of dollars less. But even though the 92 Firehawk was a technological breakthrough and an awesome first effort, unfortunately, the marketplace wasn't ready for a $40,000 Formula Firebird, no matter how quick it was. As a result, only 25 92 Firehawks were ever built. But SLP's original concept of all-world muscle at showroom prices was still a good one. It just needed a little help from General Motors. That help came in the form of the 1993 Firebird. The fourth-generation F-bodies were beautifully styled. And more importantly, Pontiac now offered the car with an LT1 engine and a 6-speed transmission. This meant SLP didn't have to replace the entire drivetrain, so the cost to convert a Firebird into a Firehawk headed south in a hurry. This was the big bang for the buck SLP had been looking for. Stay with us as street-legal performance comes to the people when the American muscle car continues. SLP had graduated from making a conversion package for the Firebird to, in essence, making a street-legal race car in just a few years. But their original vision of making a car that outperformed the 60s muscle cars in every way without costing an arm and a leg was still out there. But finally, the prize was in sight, thanks to the fourth generation Firebirds and Camaros.
In '93, with the all-new body style, GM had raised the bar to 275 horsepower in a base V8 Firebird. So by adding a Ram air package to it, we got it up to the magic number, 300 horsepower.
Building around the 275 horsepower LT1 and a 6-speed transmission, SLP replaced the stock Formula hood with a new unit made of composite material, featuring a cold air induction system which upped the horsepower to 300. 17-inch wheels and ZR-rated rubber were part of the standard package, as was a new rear spoiler, the Firehawk graphic treatment, and megaphone-style tailpipes. This basic Firehawk conversion added a much more reasonable $59.95 to the Firebird's base price. Having learned a lesson with their first cars, SLP now created a new way of buying the Firehawk. Instead of offering a one-price hot rod with all the bells and whistles like they did in 1992, now you could order from an a la carte menu of performance options, according to your go-fast desires and your budget. Going down the menu, a performance exhaust system was available for $9.95, which was good for an additional 15 horsepower. And to go with your upgraded tires and wheels, you could order the full-on suspension package for another $14.95. 201 Firehawks sold in 1993. 500 were sold in 1994. And 671 hit the streets in 1995, including 102 convertibles. Performance from this new Firehawk was right in line with the muscle cars of the 60s. 13-second quarter miles and a top speed of almost 150 miles per hour meant Firehawk owners didn't have to back down from anything on the street, no matter how big and bad or nostalgic it was. Finally, the SLP mission had been fulfilled. They had created a car with bonsai acceleration that went around corners with the best of the world's sports cars for a few bucks more than a showroom Firebird, and it was street legal in all 50 states. Now that their vision had been achieved, the SLP team set about widening their lineup. In mid-1995, SLP created the Comp TA, a special car based on the Trans Am, and made to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the B.F. Goodrich TA radial tire. After their success with Pontiac, in 1996, SLP introduced the Super Sport Camaro. With its retro hood scoop and hugger orange paint scheme, it was a throwback to the legendary SS396 cars of the 60s, with enough punch to make you think there was a good old big block rat motor under the hood.
Because of SLP, we were able to take their engineering expertise, take a Z28, and bump the horsepower on that LT1 engine to come out with this great car in 1996 called the Camaro SS, which really brought us right back to the first generation car the muscle cars have passed.
By now, the trust level between GM and SLP was so well established that SLP was given the task of building Pontiac's 1996 and 1997 Ram Air Trans Ams. This is big-time stuff for a company that started out tuning up GM's F-bodies. But when you're good, you're good. And on the horizon were even more supercars, made for a more diverse audience. We'll tell you all about it when the American Muscle Car returns. After the Firehawk success, SLP set their sights on the sport sedan and sport truck markets with the Grand Prix GTX and the Seeker and Express sport trucks. But by far, the big news was the massive popularity of the Super Sport Camaro. There was a risk in resurrecting one of the most beloved names in muscle car history. SLP knew that anything named Super Sport would have a lot to live up to. Their version of the SS Camaro met this challenge head-on.
The SS has always been the ultimate in terms of horsepower. One of the beauties of the Camaro SS is, let's face it, it is performance American style. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's got a muscular V8 engine, it's got rear-wheel drive, solid axle. It's what we've always known as the American performance muscle car. We're today building the fastest Camaros and the most powerful Camaros we've ever built. And you can run the air conditioner while you're doing it.
For 2001, there's a V6 revolution going on with a high-pull version of an old favorite, the Rally Sport Camaro. All the go-fast tricks learned from the Super Sport were folded into this car, along with some special tuning to create a nimble V6-powered street machine that beats V8 cars' insurance premiums by a mile. Today's Firehawks and SS Camaros are created in SLP's new facility, located 20 minutes away from GM's F-body assembly lines. Under one roof, SLP's 250 car builders handle the complete transformation from great car to supercar. Stock rear axles are changed to high-strength Auburn units. Shocks, springs, and sway bars are upgraded, and bigger brakes are installed. SLP's own designed fiberglass hood, with its more efficient horsepower-making airbox and heat extractors, is manufactured on-site and taken straight from finishing to installation. This step ensures the highest quality control for these parts. 17x9 wheels and Firestone P275/40/17 ZR tires are mated perfectly to the car's needs and capabilities. And each car gets its own special cosmetic treatment as a warning that this car packs a little more heat than ordinary Camaros and Firebirds. This heat comes from the latest version of America's favorite engine, the 350 cubic inch LS1 small block.
When the LS1 V8 debuted in the F-car in 1998, a lot of people questioned the wisdom of putting a pushrod 2-valve engine in a modern car. But I tell you what, those guys really knew what they were doing. You don't get the flat, broad torque curve of the V8 with an overhead cam engine. It may be traditional architecture, but believe me, it's a state-of-the-art power plant.
The 327 horsepower LS1 engine provides low 13-second quarter-mile times, and the car corners like a slot car. The bark from the catback exhaust system is guaranteed 60s cool, and the SLP graphics are genuine traffic stoppers. Firehawks and SS Camaros are extremely low production automobiles, and they've already generated enough excitement from car collectors to make them overnight classics. But these are cars that are meant to be driven, and driven hard. And that's how a car gets to be a classic. SLP has done all this their way, using the highest tech methods to achieve the same old result. Kick-in-the-pants performance in a car that's drop-dead gorgeous for a price everyone can afford. Hey, isn't that the same way the muscle car thing started? Thanks for watching. And please remember, don't crush them, restore them. The Dodge Dart was proof that it didn't cost a fortune to have the fastest muscle car on the block. If you were around in the 60s, around the drag strip that is, there was one thing you noticed right away. If two cars with identical engines raced, the lighter car won just about all the time. This was the whole idea behind the muscle car revolution. Putting top-of-the-line engines in medium-sized cars was a great idea, and it created some pretty fast cars. But for some people, even this wasn't enough. These people had to have more speed. They didn't care about luxury or a rich kid image. They just wanted to be first to the finish line. For these people, there was the Dodge Dart GT. The Dart GT was a perfect example of no-frills, go-fast. This car evolved from Dodge's first compact car into an all-world drag racer in just a few short years by offering more punch per pound than just about any other car of the muscle era. Performance like this doesn't happen if you're lugging around an extra 1,000 pounds of luxury options. But the Dart was no ugly duckling.
Thanks to Dodge's styling department, between 1961 and 1967, the Dart evolved from a very plain-Jane little grocery getter into a pretty stylish street machine. Mopar lovers took to this little car like hungry people to a $1.99 buffet. Over the next few years, Dodge stayed with this popular body style and continued to build more horsepower into the car. The 340 engine and Mopar's reliable 383 made this car a potent little street fighter. But the ultimate weapon of the 60s, the 426 Hemi, eventually found its way between the front fenders of the Dart, and that created a drag racing legend, the Hemi Dart.
The Dart was built as a race car. It was a real, legitimate, honest, off-the-showroom race car. You know, you could take it home, put some slicks on it, and put an oil pan on it, a bigger pan on it, and pretty much go race the car.
For years, the benchmark for Detroit performance had been 10 pounds of vehicle weight per horsepower. The average 383 Dart GTS beat this by a wide margin. The Hemi Dart obliterated it. While most other 60s muscle cars were straining to achieve this magic number, the street Darts rolled off the assembly line in fighting weight. The ones made for the strip were so light you could almost see through them, and this made for some wild times on the drag strip. Mopar racer Herb McCandless developed his own Hemi Dart driving technique.
People that said they really watched the tack in those cars, they were lying. Because what it became was rhythm. As the car peaked in low gear, you touch the clutch, pull second. Same situation into third, put it in high gear and look around, hope you were in front. That was the name of the game.
You'd have to expect a car like this from Dodge. Dodge was Chrysler's performance division, the home of the Ram Chargers racing team, and horsepower brokers since the early 50s. No other car company had more gung-ho racing fanatics on their payroll. Dodge's motto was, give the public what they want, and our public wants fast cars. The Dart GT, the GTS, the Dart Swinger, and the awesome Hemi Dart are evidence that Dodge wasn't interested in coming in second in any kind of race. We'll take a look at how the Dodge Dart became such a street favorite when the American muscle car returns. From hot rodding's earliest days, power-to-weight ratio was the supreme principle. But for years, that logic didn't compute in Detroit, for one basic reason. You couldn't make money on small cars.
Dealers want to sell you large cars that are full of content. In other words, they want to sell you the most loaded up, optioned out car that they can, simply because that's what they make most of the money on.
For decades, this big car mentality was the conventional wisdom, until a recession hit the country in the late 50s. All of a sudden, people were looking for smaller, less expensive cars. Detroit responded with a whole line of econo boxes, which all had one thing in common. They were as sparse as their big brother cars were luxurious. In 1961, Dodge hit the market with the Lancer. It looked like a 3/4 scale version of a full-size Dodge. It weighed around 2,600 pounds, and it sold for just about $2,000. The Lancer was powered by either a 170 cubic inch or a 225 cubic inch slant 6 engine. Definitely not a muscle power plant. But wouldn't you know it, those gearheads at Dodge even found a way to hot rod this little six-banger. The 225 Hyperpack Slant 6 could actually make more than 275 horsepower. By the mid-60s, compact cars were here to stay. But if little cars weren't going to go away, maybe there was a way to make them profitable.
Mustang GT, designed to be designed by you.
The Ford Mustang was really the first time that a manufacturer made a small car profitable. And of course, really, profit's what drives everything. That's what makes the dealers push certain cars. Through the Mustang program, the dealers finally saw that they could indeed make money on small cars.
Once Dodge saw the Mustang's phenomenal success, they wasted no time jumping on the sporty car bandwagon. And it didn't take much to turn the Dart into a pretty cool little compact car. Thanks to its sporty looks and a few racy things like 4 on the floor, a sport steering wheel, and gauges, the Dart GT joined the Mustang and the Barracuda as the only other sport compact on the street. It's still stickered for around $2,400, but with extra cost options like a console, bucket seats, power steering, and air conditioning, you could run it up to nearly $2,800, which put the little car safely inside Dodge dealers' comfort zone. But by 1966, the big buzz on the street was not sport compacts. It was muscle cars. And Dodge's muscle cars were definitely not El Cheapo runabouts. About the only thing these cars had in common with the Dart was the Dodge emblem on the hood. When Dodge's styling department gave the Dart a sleek new look in 1967, for the first time the Dart looked like a muscle car. Its high-po 273 cubic inch engine produced 235 horses. Good for a sport compact, but definitely not a muscle car. But the Dart GT did have a couple of very nice features. It weighed 500 pounds less than most muscle cars, and on most insurance forms, it was listed as a low-powered compact car. Dodge saw this as an opportunity to do something all new.
By the late 60s, one of the problems that everyone had with the muscle car movement was insurance companies started charging excessive premiums for all the displacement and horsepower that the muscle cars made. That led to the rise of the junior muscle car. That would be the small block powered muscle car. You got most of the visual flash of the traditional big inch muscle cars. However, the insurance companies classified these vehicles as compacts, and thus they had a very low insurance premium.
Help was on the way in the engine department, too. In the pipeline was a real muscle Dart, with all the go-fast goodies. But Dodge was going to need a little help to get it into the showrooms. We'll tell you that story when the American muscle car returns. In 1968, Dodge and Plymouth were the cars to beat in the door slammer classes. At most drag strips, a weekend meet was an infomercial for Mopar muscle cars.
The performance-minded people that sat in the stands, they saw the Chrysler cars win, and win on a regular basis. Those cars enabled a lot of people to get involved in a fast race car that wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise.
Muscle car buyers soon found the car dealers in their area that spoke their language and could get them the cars they wanted. Recognizing this good thing, some car dealers began to specialize in selling and servicing performance cars. One of the most famous of all these high-performance dealerships was Grand Spalding Dodge in Chicago, owned by Norm Krause, better known as Mr. Norm.
And then when we started the dealership, the whole dealership was keyed up to total performance. We ordered 50 of this at a time, 50 Ram Chargers, 13 to 1s, then the 12.5 to 1s, and then the 11 to 1s. We had them all coming into our place, and the only thing we ordered was performance cars.
High on Dodge's agenda was loading up the Dart GT with more horsepower. But at first, nobody thought this was possible. Nobody but a bunch of hot rodders at Mr. Norm's Grand Spalding Dodge, that is.
They promised us a Dart with a 383 or a 440 engine, and it never came through. He says, well, we wanted to give you a 383, but our engineers tell us it won't fit. I said, okay. And I went into the shop, and I told Dennis, I said, get a Dart in here, get a 383. I want to know why this doesn't fit in the car. The next day he came in, he says, well, we got it in the car. I said, so what was the problem? He said, there was no problem. He says the exhaust on the left side was a little too close to the steering coupler, so we put a heat deflector in there. So I called Detroit. I said, I got a 383 Dart for you. He said, Bob said, bring it down. I drove it to Detroit, pulled into Hamtramck there. He came down, looked at the car, drove it. He said, this is nice. He called up the engineers, and he says, look what the kids from Chicago did. He says, oh, they put a heat deflector in there. He says, so why couldn't you?
Thanks to this high-performance R&D for Mr. Norm, in late 1967, Dodge issued the Dart GT with big block power. The 383 Dart was such a people-pleaser that for 1968, they unleashed the Dart GTS with two high-performance engines, the nasty 300-horse 383 or the all-new 340 small block. The small block 340 was one screaming little engine, Its 275 rated horsepower was achieved with 10.5 compression, a 455 lift hydraulic cam, a single Carter thermoquad 4-barrel carburetor, and dual exhausts. Getting Mopar's 383 into the Dart was a tight squeeze. It required the use of more restrictive exhaust manifolds, and because of this, it was downrated to 300 horsepower. But this rating helped keep the Dart on the low-risk page at most insurance companies. Dart lovers could now get their jollies by winding the 340 to 6,000 RPM in every gear, or they could jump in a 383 power GTS and light the afterburner on that torque monster. Either way, the Dart had become an e-ticket ride. And if you were lucky enough to be living in the Chicago area, you could still take your Dart back to Mr. Norm's for a little extra tweaking.
Now, when we sold a car, they became a member of Mr. Norm's Sport Club, and they got a free dyno tune. The car would put out 190, 200 horsepower on the car. And they said, hey, this is supposed to put out 300. I said, not to worry, not to worry. Then we used to turn it off, and our guys used to curve the distributor, rejet the carburetor, and then we used to dyno the car after that was done, and then we'd put a load on it at 5,000 RPM. There was the gauge burying the needle at 325. You never seen such excited customers in your life. I used to get excited. Oh, it worked.
The 383 Dart's bare-knuckles approach didn't attract the six-way power seat crowd, but it lit up everyone who had a need for speed. And it made true Mopar believers out of a lot of folks who came to Mr. Norm's to trade in their Fords and Chevys.
When a fella came in with a GTO or a Mustang, or he came in with a Plymouth, we had a Bible that we kept on the parts department. We made him swear allegiance and admit to his mistake. You know, the customers went along with it. We took pictures of them. They made fun. They swore that they would never buy another Chevy or Ford, that they would come and buy, and a lot of them did. 90% of them all came back and bought their cars from us.
There's a downside to being a true horsepower addict, though. For these folks, there's never enough. It was this mindset that created the most awesome car of the muscle era, the Hemi Dart. We'll get inside this bonsai mobile when the American muscle car returns. Thanks to a nice shot of horsepower, the Dart had morphed into a pretty stout street machine, turning low 15-second times, or even mid-14s with drag strip tuning. This made the Dart an excellent, but not an awesome muscle car. At the very top of the awesome list were cars packing Mopar's ultimate weapon, the mighty Hemi. In mid-1968, Dodge was looking for an edge to give its superstock racing teams. The lightweight Dart and the racing version of the 426 Hemi were the makings of an all-world supercar. When Dodge combined these two volatile ingredients, they made a bomb. The Hemi Dart was not a car for the masses, and that was okay, since they practically needed to be hand-built. Stuffing the Hemi into the Dart's engine bay required some pretty radical modification. So Hurst Performance got the job of turning assembly line Darts into street-legal super stock race cars. Dart bodies, without any sound deadener or seats, were shipped to Hurst, with the engines and drive lines shipped separately. Hurst fabricated special motor mounts, suspension, steering, and other components, and completed the assembly. All of Chrysler's heavy-duty components were used, like Dana rear ends, heavy-duty ignition, and a Mopar Superstock battery, relocated to the trunk for better weight distribution. Hemi Darts were slimmed down a couple 100 pounds less than their stock weight by installing fiberglass hoods and front fenders, gutting the doors and installing lightweight glass, and lightweight front bucket seats. The cars were delivered to the racers through selected Dodge dealers without a finished paint job, and needless to say, no warranty of any kind. The race Hemi was a triumph of Chrysler engine development in the 60s. Two Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetors on an aluminum cross ram intake manifold, a solid lifter camshaft, a forged crank and rods, and 12.5-to-1 compression with a starting point. the race teams took it from there, making the Race Hemi's conservative rating of 500 horsepower a complete joke.
You could make a stock Hemi with unported cylinder heads, no more bigger bore than 60 over. You could run any camshaft, and you had to run a stock intake manifold, make 725 horsepower.
Driving a Hemi Dart was a true heart-stopping experience. Dropping the hammer on all this horsepower in such a light car could really get your attention.
I mean, you hit the throttle on that thing, and it will scare you. You put somebody in it that's never been in a muscle car, it'll hurt them. They want out.
Hurst cranked out about 80 Hemi Darts and an additional 50 or so Darts with the 440 wedge motor. Not very many to go around. By 1969, the Dart had several reputations. It was a sporty car with a racy small block, a street cruiser with a torquey 383 big block, and a monster machine with Hemi or 440 Magnum power. But its image as an economy car was still on the books at most insurance companies. With premium rates on the rise for just about anything with a V8 and a 4-speed, this was a blessing. So when something's working, you go with it, right? We'll show you how Dodge continued to make the Dart even stealthier when the American muscle car returns. By late 1969, this muscle car thing was like a snowball rolling downhill. Everything was getting bigger, faster, more expensive, except the Dodge Dart. Dodge realized the things that had made the Dart a success, good horsepower and sporty looks at a low price, still worked. So why not go around again with another car that offered even more of the same? The 1970 Dart Swinger was, believe it or not, a low-buck Dart, but without any low-buck look or feel. Dodge gave it a base price of just $25.79 and packed it with all the go-fast goodies, like the Hypo 340 and a Hurst-shifted 3-speed manual trans as standard equipment. The same basic Dart body shell was upgraded with new styling, and new Ram-style hood scoops fed cold air to the 340. Dodge's Scat Pack Bumblebee stripes wrapped around the tail, just to let everyone know that this car had some sting. The Swinger's new low price didn't scale back its interior one bit. And with Dodge's range of colors, everything from plum crazy to Hemi orange, the Dart Swinger was way too cool to be called an economy car. The 1970 Swinger was the most popular Dart yet, with almost 120,000 cars built. By now, though, this body style had been around for 4 years, and it was due for an upgrade. But where do you go from such a popular shape? Well, if you're Dodge, you look next door at Plymouth. The Plymouth Duster had debuted to massive success, not only as a successor to the Valiant, but with a 340 engine, the world's next great small block muscle car. Dodge said, anything you can do, we can do better, and borrowed this body style for 1971, naming it the Dart Demon and packing it with all the stuff that had made the Dart a people-pleasing muscle car. The 340 Demon was the 70s version of a 60s favorite.
For 1971, Dodge continued to offer performance in the A-body line with the Demon 340. As always, you got the visual impact that made the muscle car era so famous, and you got good performance with the 340 under the hood. But as always, there's something more. If the standard 1971 Demon 340 wasn't hot enough for you, all you had to do was take a trip to Mr. Norm's Grand Spalding Dodge in Chicago, Illinois. He offered a special version called the GSS. What that included was a hotter camshaft, some valve train changes, and of course the crowning glory, 3 two-barrel Holley carburetors on an aluminum intake manifold.
NHRA's new Pro Stock competition was a showcase for Demons and Dusters. Mopar's drag racing teams wasted no time in squeezing more performance out of the new A-body cars than the Dart had ever cranked out. While the Demon carried on as Dodge's new high-performance compact, the Dart was relegated back to its humble economy car roots, with only slant 6 power or motivation from the low-performance 318 V8. The world had moved on, and a younger crowd of muscle car fans had found a new favorite low-buck rocket ride. But as the 70s progressed and unleaded fuel and insurance pressures continued to increase, even the high-performance Demon finally succumbed. After 1972, the aggressive Demon nickname was dropped in favor of a more vanilla Dart Sport model name. And by 1973, the only V8 offered in the Dart was the 318. Gone forever were the 340 and 383 fun engines, and the Hemi and the 440 were just dim but fond memories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the American Muscle Car. Remember, don't crush them, restore them. Next on the American Muscle Car, in 1968, Plymouth asked the world what happens when you blend big horsepower with a little cartoon character. You get a Roadrunner. It had been a wild 4 years since the first muscle car, this 1964 GTO, had appeared on the automotive scene. Wild for car buyers, whose muscle car dreams were coming true in the showrooms across the land. And wild for the car companies, who were turning out more and more of these great cars every year. But somewhere along the way, the original muscle car idea had gotten lost. Putting top-of-the-line engines in low-cost cars had created this phenomenon. But the car makers' scramble to load these cars up with style and comfort options had by now inflated some muscle cars' price tags to over $4,000. With muscle cars selling like hotcakes, nobody noticed that they were becoming a little fat and a little pricey.
Well, as the muscle car market moved through the 60s, it picked up a pretty good price tag. The Mopars, you had the Belvedere GTX, you had Coronet RT, and they were not cheap. And, there was a prestige factor going at work here, too. And Mopar was the first one to really identify the market for a low buck, no frills, maximum bang for the buck muscle car.
This is the 1968 Plymouth Roadrunner, and it's one of the most important cars of the entire muscle era. The Roadrunner is important because it took the muscle car movement back to its roots. Plymouth's goal was to create a car that would run 100 miles per hour in the quarter-mile drags and sell it for under $3,000. For Mopar fans, it was a gift from muscle car heaven. It wasn't that Chrysler Corporation didn't already build fast cars. Far from it. Mopars were standout performers on every racetrack, from Daytona to Bonneville. In drag racing, the Max Wedge cars and the mighty 426 Hemis were nearly unbeatable. Chrysler's big engines and these lightweight bodies made beautiful race cars. But to the gang at the drive-in, it wasn't enough to be fast. You had to look fast, too.
You take the 67 GTX, for example, tremendous car, fast car, beautifully executed. They couldn't sell it because it didn't have an image, okay? And marketing and packaging your muscle car, it had to have image.
So in 1968, Plymouth gambled that the original muscle car premise was still valid and created a muscle car that followed this formula to the letter. They took their redesigned Satellite, stripped it of practically everything but 4 tires and a steering wheel, and put in a heated-up version of the old reliable 383 cubic inch power plant. Then they stuck a price tag on it that just about anybody could afford. Plymouth knew they had to build image into the car, so they came up with maybe the best marketing gimmick of the muscle era. They named the car after a little bird from a popular Saturday morning cartoon that scorches the asphalt as he blows the doors off the coyote.
it was sheer genius. We'll see how Plymouth made this little bird roar like a tiger when the American muscle car returns. The 68 Roadrunner was a bold step for Chrysler Corporation, a company best known for lavish automobiles. Despite their reputation as a luxury car builder, Chrysler was into performance in a big way. Chrysler's emphasis was clearly on performance, but America's definition of performance car in those days was the full-size, top-of-the-line big boat, with all the bells and whistles and a price tag to match.
These bucket seats, for example, are the most comfortable we've ever built. They cradle and support the body, and yet don't trap you. And of course, up front, a tachometer that is so important to high-performance cars.
Detroit and the whole world knew that going fast cost money. The more you wanted to spend, the faster you could go. And this is how things were until 1964.
Plymouth and Dodge, and just about everybody in the industry, had watched Pontiac just blow right by him with the GTO. The concept of a packaged muscle car was something that no one else had ever done before Pontiac had in 1964. Sure, people had put 409 engines in or 413s, but they weren't a package where it was all put together with one nameplate and sold that way. Pontiac did that in 1964. And it was extremely successful, and it took the other people in the industry a little while to understand what the concept was and how important it was.
The GTO started a rush among the car companies to make cars which appealed to the youth market. Fortunately for Ford and General Motors, they had intermediate body styles which were both inexpensive and sporty looking, both qualities necessary to attract the young buyer. But Chrysler didn't have any sporty intermediate cars. Instead, they had an endless parade of business coupes and land yachts. Engine power, the essential muscle car ingredient, was no problem. With a Hemi or a 426 Max Wedge, a Plymouth Belvedere could walk all over a stock GTO or SS Chevelle. But no matter how fast it went, the Belvedere just wasn't a cool car.
You just couldn't stick a motor in a car and say, well, here it is, guys. You know, the youth market really gravitated toward excitement. And if the car wasn't exciting, they weren't going to buy it.
The situation clearly called for something outrageous. And what could be more outrageous than a best bang for the buck street racer with an irresistible hook? The legendary street battle between the cute little Roadrunner and the mean old Coyote. The car was the epitome of the factory hot rod, and people loved it immediately.
They made two styles. Mine is called the coupe because it has the post, and they made a hardtop. Those were the only two styles. The other thing that was unique about them is most of them came with no carpeting in them. They were very basic. The 4-speed was not an option. The 4-speed was standard. And if you wanted an automatic, I've got the original window sticker on it. You paid $39 more for the automatic. That sounds crazy to say that, but it's true.
In base form, you got a bench seat, you got a rubber floor mat, you got a taxi cab, basically, with a little trim on it, and either a 383 or a 426 Hemi motor. I mean, it was all seriousness. There was no puff here.
Inside the Roadrunner, you discovered just how Spartan a stripped-down Plymouth Belvedere could be. The rear side windows didn't even roll down. They popped out on little hinges. Plymouth brought the car in for $2,870, $130 under their $3,000 target price. In one bold stroke, Plymouth had solved their identity problem with young America and had slid right into a market niche full of hungry muscle car buyers. They had literally reinvented the muscle car. When the American muscle car returns, we'll see the other reason the Roadrunner was such an immediate hit: huge horsepower. By the middle of the 1968 model year, there were thousands of Roadrunners beeping their way up and down America's cruising boulevards. Young people had taken to this car like they had taken to Saturday morning cartoons. The Roadrunner's philosophy of keep it simple extended to the available engines. Plymouth's standard Roadrunner motor was their old reliable 383, but with a few welcome enhancements. Large port heads from the 440, a beefier valve train, and a special 450 lift cam made 335 horsepower at 5,200 RPM and 410 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPM with a single Carter ABS carburetor. Following the classic Mopar style of big engine, light body, the 383 equipped Roadrunner was most pleasing to the lead-footed segment of the buying public. But when it came to muscle car engines, the rule was bigger is better. So Plymouth decided to offer just one alternative engine, the 426 Hemi. There was no more revered engine in motorsports than the mighty Chrysler Hemi. It had propelled stockers, dragsters, sports cars, and even Indy-style race cars into the winner's circle since 1951. With its reappearance on the street in 1965, a Hemi badge in your car's fender got you instant respect.
The 383 with 335 horsepower was your base engine. The only optional engine in '68 was the 426 Hemi. The street Hemi, of course, was literally the king at the time of the street. There was really nothing that could touch it. A Hemi, automatic, in a Roadrunner, was a very, very fast car.
The 426 Street Hemi used a 4.25-inch bore and a 3.75-inch stroke, and Chrysler rated this engine at 425 horsepower at 5,000 RPM and 490 foot-pounds of torque at 4,000 RPM. The Hemi in the Roadrunner was the ultimate street weapon in 1968. In its low-key Plymouth satellite body, this little bird behaved more like a wolf, prowling the street, ready to pounce on its prey. Plymouth knew the base model stripped-down Roadrunner wouldn't suit everyone's tastes, so the car's short option list did include a few comfort and appearance items. For $355, your Roadrunner could have air conditioning. For another $94 each, power steering and power brakes. Stereo tape with AM radio was priced at $195, and cruise control would set you back $53. But cruise wasn't available with the Hemi. Plymouth obviously figured that the only cruise control anyone needed with the Hemi was a heavy foot. Even the dress-up stuff, so vital to the muscle car image, was optional on the Roadrunner. Sport stripes cost $15, and a blackout hood treatment was an additional $18. The only adornment that came with the base model was the little Roadrunner on each door and the tail, and of course, the horn. By mid-year 1968, the Roadrunner had become so popular that Plymouth expanded the line to include a two-door hardtop. Almost 45,000 Roadrunners sold that first year, a fantastic success for a simple sedan built around a little cartoon bird and a big engine. Plymouth went into 1969 with great momentum and a plan to make the Roadrunner more attractive and even faster. We'll tell you that story when we return on the American Muscle Car. The '68 Roadrunner's popularity told Plymouth that they were doing it right with this car. So for 1969, they decided not to fix what wasn't broken. The '69 Roadrunner had even less shiny trim. The stainless steel tail panel on the '68 was deleted for '69, and the only other exterior change was a slight grille redesign. Along with the Roadrunner's success came an increased price tag for 1969. Base Roadrunner coupes now stickered for $29.45. The two-door hardtop sold for $30.83, and the all-new convertible came in at $33.13. Even with the price increases, Plymouth was still giving the muscle car crowd the biggest bang for the buck.
Basically, they were a muscle car to go fast. People didn't want power windows, they didn't want power steering, they didn't want power brakes. Anything that came off the engine, they didn't want to do it.
Plymouth was pouring engineering into this car. The Roadrunner featured heavy-duty brakes and suspension, wider tires and wheels, and sure grip differentials. The 4-speed and torque flight automatic transmissions used in the Roadrunner were the beefiest in Chrysler's inventory. Under the hood, Plymouth added the romping 375-horse, 440-cubic-inch wedge engine with a trio of Holley 2-barrel carburetors. Dubbed the 446-pack, this engine was one of the fastest street power plants ever offered in the Mopar Intermediates. The street Hemi was still king of the jungle, even though its cost inflated the price of a '69 Roadrunner by more than $800.
In stock form, a strong Hemi could run through the quarter mile in low 13s. And if you wanted to tune it and tweak it, you could get it down into the 11s without losing a lot of streetability.
The Roadrunner opened the door for a parade of theme cars like Pontiac's Judge and Ford's Fairlane Cobra. Both cars attempted to copy the Roadrunner's formula of low-cost, high-visibility horsepower. Ford left no question in anyone's mind as to who they were going after with the Fairlane. The one place from which Plymouth didn't expect competition was their own corporation. Over in the next building, the Dodge boys were busy working on a low-buck, high-concept rocket ship of their own, based on the Coronet. They used the same mega-horsepower 440s and 426 Hemis, put Bumblebee stripes around its tail, and called it Super Bee.
This is a version of the Roadrunner. It's the Dodge version of the Roadrunner. I bought this car in 1984 from my father, who bought it originally in Beckley, West Virginia. The car, when we originally bought it, had 20,150 miles on it. I basically raced the car from 1984 on up to about 1995, strictly as a drag car. I kept all the original parts to the car, and in 1995, I decided to return the car back to its original condition. It takes me back to when my father actually had one of these, and it's just a time of my life I'll never forget, and I'll always remember. That's why I have this car.
Super Bees were only offered in two-door coupes and hardtops, and base models had sticker prices under $3,000. To go with the big horsepower, Dodge included the rally suspension and bigger brakes, but unfortunately for Dodge, they just couldn't figure out a way for the horn to buzz. The Super Bee was a very limited production car and didn't eat into the Roadrunner's sales at all. Roadrunner was by far the success story of the industry. 1970 was the peak of the muscle car years. More horsepower, more wild graphics and paint schemes, more of everything. Plymouth already had all its cards on the table with the Roadrunner, since they decided from day one to go with the Hemi, and from day two to offer the 446-pack. So for 1970, they did the only thing they could do. They made the car more beautiful. We'll be back with the fabulous 70 Roadrunner. After the success of 1968 and 1969, it was hard to see how Plymouth could improve on the Roadrunner. One look at the 1970, and you had your answer. A more sculptured shape graced the sides of the car, with stylish scoops forward of the rear wheel openings. The grille and tail panel underwent their first real upgrades. The redesigned grille was actually a more effective air intake to help cool the big Chrysler engines. The little bird still adorned the car from its sides and tail, and the car still went as it dusted off its competition. Added to the underhood lineup was a new engine for 1970, the 440 Commando with a single Carter AVS 4-barrel. This engine produced 350 tire-burning horsepower without all the maintenance of the six-pack carburation system. And at a lower price, the Commando 440 added $234 to the Roadrunner's bottom line, compared to the 446-pack's $250 and the hefty $841 upcharge for the Hemi. Plymouth also did something unheard of for 1970. They rolled back the Roadrunner's prices to just about 1968 levels. A base model two-door coupe stickered for $28.96. The hardtop cost $30.34, and the convertible sold for $32.89. And for that, Plymouth now threw in carpeting. It was an unbeatable deal. Thanks to the momentum from the Roadrunner, the Super Bee, and the whole lineup of the Mopar muscle machines, Chrysler was on an incredible roll. Their designers made the entire era memorable with all their wild colors and graphics. Colors like Plum Crazy, Go Mango, Sublime, Banana, Hemi Orange, and all the rest are symbols of the muscle car era at its height. But there is no more striking symbol of the muscle car than the Superbird.
Watch the most exciting finish in history as Leroy Yarbrough comes from behind to win it in the last 3/4 of a mile.
Ford and Mercury had sneaked up on Chrysler in 1969 with their new super speedway cars, the Torino Talladega and the Cyclone Spoiler. These cars were made to run on the NASCAR high banks and were several miles an hour faster because of their aerodynamics. Plymouth had even lost their ace, Richard Petty, to Ford in 1969. Plymouth's solution was typical Mopar: go big or stay home. To qualify under NASCAR rules, Plymouth made 1,920 Superbirds, an average of one car for every 2 Plymouth dealerships in the U.S. With a price tag of over $4,300, they were well outside the Roadrunner's magic $3,000 target. But these cars had one purpose in life: to put Plymouth back in the winner's circle. And they succeeded. They lasted 1 year until Ford cried foul and NASCAR's rules forced them off the track. The years after 1970 were not kind to the muscle car, the Roadrunner in particular.
3 things contributed to the death of the muscle car: the oil embargo, where OPEC shut off the spigots, the ever-tightening insurance industry regulations on muscle cars, and the emission standards that all cars had to meet.
Like an old athlete, the 71 Roadrunner gained weight and lost a step or two. Its new base engine was now a lower compression 300 horse 383. To make up for the loss of power, Plymouth made the graphics larger and added more comfort options. But it wasn't the same car. Roadrunners existed in this new body style until 1974. The last standard power plant was the 318.
The muscle car market itself had peaked by 1970, was on the decline, and the Roadrunner was one of the victims. In 1978, I believe, they tried to restore the name and hang it on a Volare as a trim package, which was not a good idea. And but the glory days for the Roadrunner were most certainly 1968 to 1971.
It ended gradually. Each year, horsepower and compression ratio were down, performance was down, and I lived through that era. I was involved with the muscle cars of that era, and it wasn't something that we noticed taking place. It happened so gradually over about a 5 or 6 year period of time that all of a sudden one day we woke up and realized that muscle cars don't exist anymore, yet we had never seen it happen.
The Roadrunner lives as maybe the single most memorable car of the muscle era. It hit while the horsepower war was at its very hottest, and it made the whole world stop and take notice. And even these days, when you hear a little and hear a blast of acceleration, you know it's a Roadrunner. Thanks for watching, and please remember, don't crush them, restore them.